All right, we are live. Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Adam. I am joined by Colin. How you doing, Colin?
I'm doing very good, thank you.
Awesome. And we are going to discuss our 23 favorite movies from the year 2023. Counting backwards, 23 all the way to 1. But before we did, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the year in movies in 2023? What are your thoughts on it? Was it a good year? Was it a bad year? Did you enjoy it? Let me know.
So it's there's a lot of avenues with that. For me, it was on a personal note a record-setting year. I went to the movies a lot. I still have a couple that I'm knocking out, but I'm gonna get in 100 trips to the theater, which is pretty wild. Never done that before. I have gotten well over 200 first watches this year, which is obviously a combination of the theater and watching stuff at home. I did a 52-week movie challenge, which I'm in the last week of. And as far as the movies specifically go, tons and tons of memorable stuff. 23, there was so many big stories going on that it's going to distract from the movies themselves. I think we're going to look back on this year and see, there was some really, really amazing, and I think we can say timeless movies that came out of this year that are just going to be remembered for a long time, which it doesn't seem like that's the case, when you just think about it at face value. But it's just something I feel like we're gonna see that in the years to come. Obviously we had Barbie and Oppenheimer was just this gigantic thing, but there's so many other small things, and a lot of them I think we're going to talk about that are just going to prove to be timeless. I think.
So I was listening to a podcast and they were mentioning, and I'm going to get the specifics wrong, but this is the first year since 2001 where the top 3 movies of the year were not a prequel or sequel. But 2001 was also the first Harry Potter and the first Lord of the Rings. So they obviously had sequels to come. Yeah. And so the top 3 in terms of grossing were Barbie, Oppenheimer, and the Super Mario Brothers movie. And the Super Mario Brothers movie is 100% going to get a sequel. And it also wouldn't surprise me if Barbie gets a sequel. Barbenheimer definitely is not getting a sequel, but it is pretty impressive that this year was less. I think also goes to what resonated with people is as franchises started to wane, what we really want, I think the movie-going public wants original creative ideas. To me, I noticed a couple of trends. First of all, I don't think I could have done 21 movies in 21 and 22 last year. So the fact that I can easily do 23 and all 23 are movies that I would definitely recommend, speaks to the depth of this year. I think the top was very good as well. I think this is the best movie year since 2019 that had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 1917, The Irishman, Parasite, Endgame. And some of that's because of the pandemic. But I kind of like 2020 weirdly, but I don't think the last couple of years were very good movie years, all things considered. So I think the fact that there's I think a lot of really good movies this year speaks to how well this year is. This was the year that, so I wrote down every big director that had a movie come out this year. So here's the list of just Hall of Fame, if we were doing there's a Hall of Fame director, their first ballot, no question. Ridley Scott, Michael Mann, Hayao Miyazaki, David Fincher, Christopher Nolan, Martin fucking Scorsese, who's an argument that he's the greatest currently the greatest living American director. Here's the tier below. I think you can make an argument if Wes Anderson maybe should have been on that list, but other really good directors that are probably just a tier below: Sofia Coppola, M. Night Shyamalan, Yorgos Lanthimos, Alexander Payne, Todd Haynes, and Paul Schrader all made movies this year.
Mm-hmm.
I have a category of former actors who don't have who only have a handful of movies under their belt, but still I feel like are kind of events when they make movies, of Greta Gerwig, Ben Affleck, Bradley Cooper, Emerald Fennell, and then just a handful of just like really good directors that like maybe more movie nerds would know more than anyone else, and that's Ari Aster, Jonathan Glazer, Kelly Reichardt, and Nicole Holofcener. And so one, I feel like the caliber of directors that made movies this year was like pretty freaking awesome. And for the most part, like I don't think anyone necessarily made their best movie. At least I don't think so. Maybe you disagree. But I think all of them made really, really good movies. Something like Ridley Scott can be hit or miss. A couple years ago he had Last Duel and House of Gucci, one I liked, one I didn't. And I don't know what you thought of Napoleon. I really liked it. And so the fact that like you can have like these great directors sometimes miss sometimes, and the fact that so many really awesome to like holy shit directors made like at least really good movies speaks to how well a movie this is. Then I also on my list, I have a lot of Netflix movies that are going to be on my list where I'm normally not a fan of Netflix originals outside of the ones that are clearly like they acquired it or made it solely to get Oscar nominations. And I feel like a lot of Netflix movies are just outright garbage. And the fact that I had a bunch this year, I think speaks to one that I definitely see less movies in the theater than you. I only saw 40 movies total. And so most of that are streaming. But the fact that I feel like Netflix had a good year,
yeah,
we can debate again whether that's good for the culture or not. But I mean, more good movies, the better. And if Netflix is going to be the biggest thing in movies and they're actually producing good movies, then I think that's good for the culture.
Yeah, it's very interesting with Netflix. I go back and forth with it. I loved them when they first started out as a company, and like when I was doing a little bit of like post school stuff. I was like writing about like how they shaped the industry and how their start with Blockbuster. So I really respected them early as a company. With how close theaters came to just like dying during the pandemic, I became a huge proponent of like, you got to see movies in theaters and we need to see movies go to theaters. So Netflix is really just, they're spending all this money and they're giving these like big time filmmakers these like blank slates, because you mentioned The Irishman. The Irishman landed at Netflix because they were the only ones that would spend the amount of money that Martin Scorsese wanted so that he could make, Robert De Niro look 40 years younger, and then, I haven't read the story of how like Maestro ended up down there, but I actually just got done watching Maestro like 45 minutes ago. There's just, I like what they do creatively, but they also kind of like, they stifle a lot of stuff. But you're absolutely right that delivery system, it's good that it exists, and what I want to see is this ultimately for the best? Like, you've got a handful of people that like Netflix is like their place, and you look at the names of like who are the people that are working like exclusively with Netflix anymore, and it's Adam Sandler and Zack Snyder. So it's like, okay, well, like, I don't know.
Not the most creatively gifted people right now.
But say what you will about their product, you got to respect they are doing the work. They're putting in the output. Zack Snyder has got like at this point 2 or 3 big time original movies that he's put on there. I don't know if you watch Rebel Moon either. It's just like, like whatever, but I'm spoiler alert, that did not make my top 23, but I did watch it. I just like, I like that they get these guys in house, and it's like the old studio system, it's like we're just gonna get you going here. So I just wish that they would do more to like pump stuff theatrical. I went and saw The Killer at a local theater screening before it was on Netflix. I realized that I haven't seen a David Fincher movie in theaters since 2011 with the girl in the dragon tattoo. Because I did not see Gone Girl in theaters.
Oh, I saw Gone Girl in the theater.
And then Mank went to streaming. So I was like, I'm going. Like, this is like, I gotta go find a place that's showing this, and I did. Yeah. So
I do worry that Netflix and their model is just gonna kill movies, but like for the time being, if they're gonna like still give money and still acquire films from really creative people and like create interesting work, then like I'll give them credit while they're doing it. But let's go into our list.
Yeah, man.
I figure let's kind of breeze a little bit. 23 to 11. Maybe we can have some pit stops along the way if a really interesting movie comes up. I know there will be as we get closer to my top 10. Why don't you go first? What was your 23rd favorite movie of 2023?
The 23rd that I'm going to throw out is one that I saw very, very long time gestating. It was The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Yeah, I did not have that. I didn't know you liked it that much, so I don't have a slide for it. But
okay,
briefly, okay. What is it? What did you like about it?
So what I liked, and I'm gonna go ahead and say spoiler territory here. First of all, if people don't remember, it was the boat from Dracula. So it's based on the novel of Dracula, but it's about the boat that brings his coffin from Transylvania to London, and it's about his basically the vampire comes out and just starts picking off the crew one by one, and what I liked about it that I was not expecting to like about it was that it has a very, very playful nod to Count Dracula. If you watch the movie if you watch a trailer for the movie, it's going to look like just a straight up monster movie. It might as well not even be Dracula, but it very much is Dracula. And without saying too much, you watch all the way to the end, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is such a fun, creative choice that they made with this. And that I wasn't expecting that. That really impressed me. And, we're talking about, again, 23 movies here. So I was like, you know what? This just stuck out in my memory enough that I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to shout this out on the list here.
All right. My number 23 is a movie called The Beanie Bubble. Another trend that happened this year was biopics about products. I looked at my list. I do have a couple on them. This one is from Apple. It stars Zach Galifianakis as Ty Warner, the guy who created the Beanie Baby, and three women in his life played by Elizabeth Banks, Sarah Snook from Succession, and Geraldine Viswanathan. My apologies. There are two people who I follow on Letterboxd that have reviewed it. Both are professional critics, and both gave it 1.5 stars. I don't think people like this movie. I really did. I just thought it was enjoyable. It's a really great watch at home. I think Galifianakis absolutely kills it in this role. I think he's incredible. He actually shows off some acting range. And I just thought it was really enjoyable and just a really good time to be had.
Right on. I did not get to this one, so we're trading nothing.
All right, what's your 22?
My 22. I'm going to shout out another movie that I really liked. That was probably less seen even than the Demeter one. This one is called The Kill Room.
Never even heard of it.
Okay, so you're going to be interested when I describe this to you. The star of the movie, the main character, is Joe Manganiello, but the two co-starring roles are played by, in a Pulp Fiction reunion, Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh,
And what it is about this guy who starts going by the Bagman, and he's played by Joe Manganiello, and he is basically a mob assassin in I forget what city it is, but he's murders people, right? And what ends up happening through a series of events is that they've got to start like moving his money, the organization that he works for. And they discover this woman who's played by Uma Thurman, who curates an art studio. And basically they come up with a system to start funneling their money into there that she starts using to like sell paintings. But in order to wash the money and get it paid out to this guy, she's got to come up with a painter, right? So that she can make it look like she's selling the paintings. So in his spare time, he starts coming up with these little pieces of art that are made out of the bags that he uses to strangle people. And then that's the art that they're selling and using it to launder his payments from the mob as a hitman. And then where the movie kind of takes place is all of a sudden his little pieces of art that he's doing that are actually all murder weapons start becoming huge hits and people want to buy them for real.
What's this movie called again?
It is called The Kill Room.
The Kill Room. Oh, a lot of movies with kill in the name this year.
I want to say I checked a little while ago in case I wanted to watch again. I want to say that it is on Hulu if people have Hulu.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
Let me see here. Oh, no, not anymore at this point. But I mean, it's been out for a while. You can rent on digital and stuff. So, but that was a fun, no like great shakes, but it was like some really like funny like dialogue and stuff. And it was so awesome seeing Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson together. And you realize how little like the cast of Pulp Fiction have like return to each other, which is especially funny when you look at how many like famous people, like crazy famous people, are in that movie, especially now. Yeah. But yeah, that is my number 22. I'm gonna call out.
Awesome. All right, my 22 is I think the very first movie I saw of the year. It is The Pale Blue Eye. And this is my first Netflix movie. It is directed by a guy named Scott Cooper, and I was really avoiding this movie because I really don't enjoy Scott Cooper's movies. He's done Crazy Heart, Out of the Furnace, and Black Mass, which I've seen. He's also done Antlers and Hostels. I really kind of hate him for Black Mass because the story of Whitey Bulger is like an incredible story. I grew up in Boston, so Whitey Bulger is like kind of like just a spirit that like everyone talks about. And I know it's kind of done with The Departed basically, but to ruin a Whitey Bulger story, which is like such a great idea, I kind of hate him for but he tricked me into liking one of his movies, and that's the Pale Blue Eye. It stars Christian Bale as a detective in like upstate New York in like the 19th century, and he has to solve a murder at the local I think it's West Point or something like West Point. And to help him solve the murder, he meets up with Edgar Allan Poe, played by Harry Melling, who's I think best known for playing one of the kids in Harry Potter. But
okay,
he's turned into like he's. I feel like the casting director of Netflix loves him because he's in like the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. He's in The Old Guard, and he shows up in a bunch of Netflix movies, and he's really awesome. And he shows up again in this movie, and he just kills it, and like acting outside Christian Bale, who's arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, like actor that we have going right now. Probably not, but I mean, he's up there. He definitely can have the belt if he wants it. And it's just like a really moody, enjoyable detective story. And I think by Scott Cooper, he can do mood pretty well. This movie is well paced, which I can't say for some of his other movies, particularly Out of the Furnace. But yeah, it's a detective. It's basically just like a extended Law and Order set and like West Point with Edgar Allan Poe, and it kind of has that Edgar Allan Poe of his stories vibe to it. It has a cool twist ending that I enjoy, and it's definitely a solid watch. And stupid Scott Cooper got me to like one of his movies, so credit to him.
Right on. You know, you said Scott Cooper, and I was just like trying to think back, and you rattled off some of his movies. I have only seen, out of the ones that you mentioned, I've only seen Black Mass, but I recognize there was like 3 or 4 Christian Bale movies in there.
Yeah, he looks
Out of
really
the
good.
Furnace is one of my favorite ones to use on Movie Grid.
Yeah, not on people have seen it.
Yeah,
It's also not, I really don't like it, but
I'll for sure check this out because I mean, you know, from talking to me about the Fincher movies, I love those little kind of twist ending mysteries.
I think it works without the twist too, but it's just a really solid detective story that I quite enjoyed. All
Yeah,
right,
man.
21. What's 21 for you?
So 21, I had something listed, and I'm gonna actually pull an audible on it because, like, so yeah, and you know what? Here's what I'm gonna say. I had originally wrote American Fiction, but I was thinking about it even before we got on the show, and I was like, you know, everybody's gonna have a lot of these things on here. Oh, do you actually have a slide for this one?
Yeah, because that's how you liked it.
Okay. Well, you know what? Then I'll tell you what. I was thinking about pulling an audible because I also wanted to shout out Extraction 2. But enough people probably saw that. So I will take a second and talk about American Fiction here. So I was very lucky to get to go see this. Because it was like one of those surprise screening type things that I just went to, not knowing for sure, but I had a pretty good idea about this. So the reason that this isn't in my top 10 is that I felt that this was almost like 2 separate, really good movies that got kind of bundled into one, because there is like the family drama side, because you got, you know, Tracy Ellis Ross plays his sister, Sterling K. Brown plays his brother, and then Leslie Uggams, who obviously a very famous actress. Many people have probably heard of her, but what they probably would know her the most from recently is she plays Blind Al in the 2 Deadpool movies. She plays Jeffrey Wright's mother, and they have to deal with a family tragedy, and they are just, you know, kind of going through like a lot as a family unit, and that's being expressed where they live. They own this beachfront house that they're trying to struggle with selling, and that was this really, really interesting, like, tight-knit family drama that plays out. And then also it is at the same time as what you will see in the trailers, which is that he writes this fake book that he does basically, like, he like gets a little wine drunk and he writes this fake book that he really writes the book, but he writes it completely sarcastically as this just full of just these like black hood tropes, and that, which is very much not who he is as a writer. And then it takes off. And so it's kind of like this Emperor's New Clothes story of him with this book that he wrote basically as a joke, and it ends up being entered in for this very prestigious literary award. I think it's actually called the Literary Award, and it's and he is a judge for, and so he has to conceal the fact that he wrote this book as a joke, you know. So it's extremely thought provoking and very, very funny, and I'm like so glad that I saw it. I did not put it in my top 10 because I thought that I would have liked to see it lean more into like one or the other. You know, it's right. Really balanced, which is a weird way to, which is a weird criticism to put on it. But I really loved all the characters, and I would have liked to see one of the 2 stories get more of the focus. And I almost wish this was just 2 separate movies, because, like I said, one's a really good drama, and another one is this really interesting, like, high concept, like Emperor's New Clothes type of thing.
That's a little bit disappointing to hear, because I've seen a lot of movies this year still, and there are two movies that I haven't yet seen that I thought, oh, could make my top 10. And this was one, American Fiction. It's by this guy named Cord Jefferson, who's written on basically every, like, your favorite TV show. He's a disciple of like Mike Schur. I think he's written on like The Good Place and such. And the trailers look great, and I feel like it's gotten a lot of really good buzz. It won TIFF this year, the Toronto International Film Festival. It's almost certainly going to be up for at least Best Picture. Jeffrey Wright's in contention for Best Actor. I think it looks great, but it'll be disappointing if I knew that there was like two stories. I know because I saw a different trailer, but you're right. The main trailer is like the satire of Jeffrey Wright's book. But that's a bummer if they don't come together.
I mean, so I'm trying not to give too much away. And it's entirely possible that you'll watch it and say, what the hell is Colin talking about? It's it's really good and it's really funny. I like that it's getting included amongst most prognosticators' Best Picture lists. And basically, as soon as you mentioned the TIFF, historically, that's one where like the winner is just like always nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. And so this just came out of nowhere with that. And this is a great change of pace compared to a lot of like the other like content that's going to be in the Best Picture race. It feels like this year. So I don't want to make it sound like, oh, this because to be honest with you, I was like thinking about not including this on my list at all, and instead talking about things that like I saw that not as many people might have seen. You know what I mean? So, but this was just a great movie. I love the performances, and it is seriously, it's so funny. Like Sterling K. Brown, there's been a little whispers of like, oh, maybe he sneaks into Best Supporting Actor, which would be so cool because his character's great as his brother. Like, oh, he's so funny. Like, yeah,
it's tough though because that is a super stacked.
Yeah, that's like the hardest category this year for sure.
I mean, it did make your list, so you saw a lot of movies, so. I'm looking forward to American Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
My next film is another Netflix movie from a director. I'm not familiar with her work. Her name is Chloe Damant, and it's called Fair Play. It stars Alden Ehrenreich, who's had a little return in 2023, and Phoebe Dynevor. And basically, this is like the best sexual thriller that's been out since like the 90s. It's this really interesting dynamic where these two characters, they get engaged at the beginning of the movie, and they both work at a small hedge fund, in New York City. Early on, the Phoebe Dynevor character gets a major promotion that they thought was going to go to Alden Ehrenreich's character. And then that's, the inciting incident that really gets it started, where now there's this tension between the two because she then becomes his boss. And I heard an interview with her where it's really interesting, where the director, Chloe, was like, I've had boyfriends that were filmmakers, and like my stuff will get into a film festival and there wouldn't. So it's kind of really nice that you can like see her own work of like, oh, you think he'd be super supportive, but you see like there's a lot of jealousy that arises. And I think for like 90% of the movie, it really works. It doesn't end the plane for me. I think the ending kind of stinks. Otherwise, it would be a little bit higher on my list. But I think it's like very overtly sexual, and just the power dynamics, the gender dynamics between these two characters who are in a relationship, and how it plays out both professionally and personally is just really interesting, especially from the female perspective. And I really enjoyed it. Did not expect to.
Yeah, this was one that I saw the trailer for a few months ago, and I was just like, oh, that looks kind of good. I have not gotten to this one with all the other things that I was trying to get to. I just started having to like take stuff off the roster, and this was one of the casualties that just hopefully I'll get to. But yeah, I had heard good things. And if you liked it, that means I'm definitely gonna squeeze it in when I can. I like Alden Ehrenreich. He's an interesting guy, like because he had the whole Han Solo thing, and then that just like went nowhere. But then he keeps popping up in other stuff, and you're just like, oh man! And he's in one movie in particular that I feel like is probably going to get talked about later. So
yeah, I don't think I talked about it. It's not because of him, but yeah, I definitely feel like at the road of his career, it feels like he is now. It's just like, let me work on smaller movies, or if it's a bigger movie, I'll take a smaller part. And he's kind of like getting out of quote unquote actor jail. I actually kind of like Solo, but like not for the Star Wars like sequel that it is or prequel, but for like, man, if this was just like a space heist and I like took it at that, like I enjoyed it, but then obviously the actual Star Wars. I also think Miles Teller should have gotten it over Alden Ehrenreich. I thought he maybe like was a little bit both miscast and maybe quickly gained maybe should have had a few more movies under his belt in this movie. And yeah, and I like him in the other movie that we're going to talk about later. And I think, if he starts choosing more interesting projects, then things will go just fine for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. What is your number 20?
My number 20, a very recent movie that I just watched is a Japanese movie called Monster.
Ooh, I saw that you liked it, so I have a slide for this. I had not heard of it. So tell me about Monster.
I am not going to say a lot about what it is about because I saw this knowing almost nothing going in, and that is definitely how you want to view this one. So there's very little I'm going to say, but I'm going to say this. First of all, it is completely in Japanese. So if you are not okay with reading subtitles, then, need not apply. It is a story that plays out in essentially 3 sort of chapters. And each chapter is told from a different perspective. Now, it's not like Rashomon and other movies like Rashomon that have borrowed that formula where it's like, 3 different people kind of telling the same story. What it is it's the same story every time, but you're getting more and more and more of it with each shift in perspective. So it has this big inciting incident, and then you start seeing the different perspectives, and you realize that the story is revolving around these 2 young boys, their teacher, and one of the boys' parents. And the reason that I'm including it on my list is because how it is paced and structured builds up in such a just exciting and unique way. And you just more and more, you get bought into these characters and you feel so strongly about them, but then something else happens and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this has just like totally changed how I'm looking at this story. And then finally, it's got possibly my favorite ending of any movie this year. Just how it all comes together is just honestly was breathtaking. So you go and watch this movie and you're gonna be in for it. Like you're gonna be transfixed and you're gonna be in for just like I can't even say like it's like a surprise.
It's just gonna be one hell of a ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a hell of a ride, and it's just the ending is just very, very powerful, I guess is the word that I'm gonna land on, because there's not like, it's kind of a twist, but it's also kind of not a twist because there's not like the like, oh my God moment. It's just it's just so powerful to watch and see unfold and learn more and more. Like I honestly cannot recommend it enough. And the fact that something that was as great as this is where it is for me is just a testament to what we talked about earlier with how great of a year this was.
Awesome. Yeah, and by the way, if you're not checking out movies because you have to read, then you're just missing out on a buttload of good movies.
Yes, you are.
Because that's just silly. My number 20 is another Netflix movie, although this one is one of their more prestige movies, and it's called Nyad. This is directed by Elizabeth Chai Vasarhelyi and Jimmy Chin. This is the directing duo most famously behind the documentary Free Solo. This is a narrative telling of former Olympian and marathon swimmer Diana Nyad, played by Annette Bening. And when this is based on a true story too, when she was younger, she attempted to swim from Cuba to Miami by herself and try to set the Guinness World Record and failed, and now wants to try again in her 60s. She's helped by her best friend and coach, Bonnie, who's played by Jodie Foster, and it's essentially a two-hander with Reese Ifan showing up, who plays the boat captain, help him out. And I really like this because this is like the highest ceiling of Disney's sports movie, where those traditional Disney sports movies I find to be really schmaltzy and too saccharine for me. And definitely the saccharine is helped considering Annette Bening plays Diana Nyad so acidic and really like almost off-putting, but in a way I still was compelled by. I think both Foster and Bening are on the outside, like barely on the outside looking in for probably Oscar nominations, but I thought they both did an incredible job, especially Bening, because I think it's so hard to make a character that's purposefully unlikable to the rest of the characters around her, likable to the audience. And especially you need to root for her to go from, Cuba to Miami and to complete this swim and to complete the world record. And just really enjoyable. And I know you should see movies in theaters. I'm all for that, but this is also totally a movie you can like chill like with your significant other, just by yourself, what have you, and pop it on. And it goes down smooth. It's a really enjoyable watch.
Based on your description, it sounds like she should have been played by Clint Eastwood. Everybody hates him, but the audience loves him.
She's not as racist as maybe Clint Eastwood. Yeah, like you first see her like trying to hit on a woman, and it just like completely like puts her off because she's just talking about her greatness because she's won like Olympic gold medals and stuff, and it's just like, oh, you're an asshole. But I was still rooting for her. I still really enjoy the performance, and so definitely highly recommend. That is my 20. So what is your 19?
My 19, I know you got the slide because you scrolled through it a couple of times. My 19 is going to be How to Blow Up a Pipeline.
Oh, can we talk about this movie a little bit later?
Sure.
This movie is much higher on my list.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it.
We could save it. We could save it for sure.
My number 19 is a movie called Theater Camp. It is a very small comedy. It's basically, so the actress Molly Gordon and the actor Ben Platt, I'm pretty sure they both went to Harvard Westlake, where our boy Lucas Giolito went to school, in LA, and they are friends in real life, and they were theater kids in real life, and they've essentially created a tiny movie for themselves where so the premise is the person of this theater camp, she's in a coma, and she was raising money to help like with these like theater kids or these theater people have a camp to go for the summer. So her son, played by the great Jimmy Tatro, who knows absolutely nothing about theater or acting or whatever, has to take her place. And a lot of the comedy comes from he's the straight man. And then everyone else is just very extra around him. But again, a lot of this movie is just like Molly Gordon and Ben Platt. Just feels like them being themselves, them being like, hey, let's make a movie just for us. This also stars the Bears, Io
Edebiri,
who quietly had a really awesome Edebiri.
Yeah.
She's plays one of the new camp counselors, and I just love how like very purposefully extra like all these kids are, and then the counselors are, and at the core you still have this great friendship between Molly Gordon's character and Ben Platt's character, and the side plot of like how to save this camp. And it's just one of the few movies this year that I just laughing out loud watching this. I think it was on Hulu.
If it's Searchlight, it's probably on Hulu.
Yeah.
Because that's where all like the Disney Fox stuff goes.
Yeah, it wouldn't be on Disney.
Yeah, it's on Hulu.
Awesome. I'm glad it's still on Hulu. It's definitely solid. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, that's another one that I did not get to that I'd definitely be willing to check out. I'll no spoilers, but Io Edebiri, she made an entry a little bit higher up on my list.
Mine too.
And although you might be, well, I'm curious to see if we're gonna have the same one. But my only experience with Ben Platt is the movie of Dear Evan Hansen, which was
it's so bad. It's the play. I saw the musical when my wife used to be a teacher, and her school, a bunch of high schoolers like went to see it and needed chaperones. So I was like, shit, let's chaperone. Let's get a free trip to see. And the play is extraordinary. I didn't see it with Ben Platt, although weird. I ended up seeing what's the Mormon musical?
Book of Mormon.
Yeah, I ended up seeing Book of Mormon with Ben Platt before he really got big, and he was excellent in that.
Was that in Chicago?
Yeah, it was in Chicago.
Oh, that's too bad. I wanted to go to Book of Mormon when it was here a couple years ago, and I didn't even know Ben Platt was in that.
He was one of the nice things about Chicago is that like a lot of times, right after it comes off of Broadway, it'll come immediately to Chicago because we have a great theater district. So yeah, he obviously wasn't as big as Josh Gad or Andrew Reynolds. And so yeah, he played, I think, the Josh Gad. He was great. And again, that's like what he is at heart, is just like a kid who loves to just sing and dance and play through the back of the room. And I think, shoot, make a movie that plays up to your strengths.
Right on. Yeah, I'll that's another one I'll have to check out.
All right, so that was my number 19. What is your 18?
My 18. I have A Haunting in Venice.
Ooh, I did not see it. Tell me about it.
So, coming in to 2023, this was in my top 3 most excited for of the year. Maybe like top 5, because I'm just super into whodunit movies. I really enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express, which I should say, Haunting in Venice is the 3rd movie in Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot movies from Agatha Christie, and I really enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express, but I felt like I missed out a little bit with it because I read that story in school, so I knew like kind of what the deal was. I love just like watching the whodunit movies and not knowing what's going on really. So with that in mind, I actually enjoyed Death on the Nile even more. A lot of people did not like that movie. A lot of people thought it was inferior to Murder on the Orient Express. They complained about like the digital creation of them going through like Egypt and stuff. But again, that is my jam. I just had so much fun with them, like everybody on the boat and figuring out who the murderer was, like just like how it all unfolded. Like, again, I'm just like here for that. So and then you watch the trailers for Haunting in Venice, and it's just like the kind of supernatural horror movie like nature of it, and you kind of guess where that's going to go, just because again this is a Agatha Christie novel and not like Edgar Allan Poe, but but just like the vibes on this movie are through the roof, and I honestly loved every second of it. But the reason that it's not super high on my list is that it clocks in at like an hour and 40 minutes, and I'm just beyond into what I'm watching, and then all of a sudden it just ended, and I'm like, wait, it's over? What? We just got here. So that one is also on Hulu, and I was wondering if I was going to get a chance to revisit it before I started talking about top tens to see if maybe I should elevate it more. But either way, if that's your thing, is like these kind of mysteries, and this one's got a super eerie vibe. Michelle Yeoh comes in there, fresh off the Oscar win, and she is just incredible. It's got it, and all of these have these huge ensemble casts. This one had Tina Fey, Kelly Riley, if you from the Yellowstone crowd. Who else was in it? Michelle Yeoh, Kenneth Branagh, Jamie Dornan. That's the other one who's had a really nice couple of years. He's in it as well. So it just like super fun, like as advertised for the type of movie it is. Just the reason it's not higher for me is I was just like, man, I wanted more of this.
Awesome. What number are we on? My number 18 is a little bit of a whodunit, but it's what's going to happen, and that's M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. I know just anecdotally in my life this didn't work for a lot of people, and even though I am not super sold on later stage M. Night, this one really did work on me. The premise is that there is a gay couple played by Ben Aldridge and Jonathan Groff, and they have a young daughter vacationing in a remote cabin when four strangers, most notably one of them played by Dave Bautista, comes to the cabin and says, someone needs to murder someone else or the world is going to end. And man, that premise, it worked on me. I thought Shyamalan's use of tension really worked on me. Dave Bautista, who essentially plays a gentle giant, I thought was just excellent in the movie. Kind of like, again, just in like this post-rock world of like wrestlers becoming actors, I think Bautista is just becoming like one of the best, like can actually show range and not just relying on his charisma. I just love that each of the four strangers who says someone has to die is basically an inversion of the four horsemen from the Bible. I probably should have looked it up what it was, but I think like one of them is like famine is four horsemen, and then one of them she's like, yeah, I'm a teacher, and like it ends up feeding them. It just little stuff like that just like really works on me. A lot of from what I've heard, the twist didn't work on people. To me, I didn't see this movie as having a twist. To me, I saw it as it was clearly leading to one particular decision that had to be made. Is someone going to get murdered or not? And / is what they are saying true? Is the world really ending? And how Shyamalan, I think Shyamalan, it's based on a short story that Shyamalan ended up changing for the movie. And I can understand how it didn't work on people. I totally get that. But for me, this was totally like, I was thrilled and I was enthralled throughout. This was one that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I saw this too. This was the first, if I'm remembering correctly, this was the first movie from 2023 that I went out to see this year because this came out right in February, and I enjoyed it. You mentioned Batista, but you also forgot to shout out Mr. Ron Weasley himself. Rupert Grint. He also plays one of the four intruders. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the chamber piece of it. What I would have liked is it being a little more like mysterious towards the end in terms of like the because you mentioned the whole like, is the world really going to end, and it kind of like gives you a lot of that.
I feel like it 100% answers that question.
Yeah,
and you're right. A better like it would have been a little bit more interesting if it left it a little bit more wide open.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking.
And to me, I actually like it didn't matter because I was so invested in the characters. And to me, the climax of the movie for me was like where it was all heading with these characters that really got me.
Yeah. And I mean, without spoiling anything for anybody who hasn't seen it, like how it plays out with the intruders was really interesting, but it was also like in some ways disappointing because I wanted to like learn a little more about them, even though like it's supposed to be a mystery, like their origins and how they came to know each other. But and they give you some of it, but everything is told through like exposition dialogue of them like recollecting what happened to them. All of the flashbacks are told through the eyes of the couple in the family. So like there's things that work, there's things that you couldn't really do them any differently, but yeah, no, this is a worthy inclusion, especially for people that might not have checked it out, because like the Shyamalan name is going to just like trigger some kind of response in a lot of people, and they don't really realize like he's been doing some interesting stuff lately.
Yeah, it's definitely a name where like I was really against it because, like I said, like I didn't even check out old. From what I heard, the reviews weren't that great. And I was like, this kind of seems silly, and I heard the twist. And I was like, well, that's just dumb. That seems like a really dumb Shyamalan twist. And maybe it worked on you, but like I wasn't a fan of like Split either, and I didn't even bother seeing Glass. So I mean, like I said, your mileage can vary. This one, and I get it, it's not a perfect film, but for me, it really worked. And I was really invested in, and I thought Shyamalan did a really great job with the tension. And so that was my number 18. So what is your 17?
My 17 is going to be a Netflix one. Maybe you got to this one. My 17 is They Clone Tyrone.
Ooh, I have a slide for it. What don't you talk about? I'll get the slide up.
So this was one that I did not see it right when it came out. I caught up to this maybe like maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and the biggest reason for it, like I don't want to say too much about it because it's like there's definitely some like twistiness going on in there. But as you can see, we got Jamie Foxx, and if you're one of the very few people like me that actually went and saw the Marvels, you're also going to recognize Tiana Paris, and the main character of the movie is John Boyega, and this was very just like blaxploitation kind of content, but told from such an interesting sci-fi angle. And the story is super, super fun to just like watch play out and get into it if that's kind of your thing. But the strength of the movie for me so much was getting these three characters. They're on screen together a lot, and the little conversations and side remarks that they have to each other. It is just so much fun to like watch and listen to them talk to each other. And then they're going through this mystery. It's like a super like, and they even make this joke a couple of times, but like the vibes of like, well, no. So they're making jokes about, Nancy Drew a lot in the movie. But honestly, like you have like the three of them there, and the vibe that I kept on coming back to was like Scooby-Doo. It's just like, it is just funny. And they're
like really
investigating stuff, like yeah,
or at least from what I saw, is that I was gonna say I saw the first half. My wife didn't like it, so we turned it off, and for some reason I never returned back to it. But it's got like a really interesting premise, and Jamie Foxx I thought was like incredible. He plays a literal pimp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and John Boyega plays a drug dealer, and I was like, oh, this is a far away from Star Wars. and he gets murdered. He gets straight up murdered in like the inciting incident of the movie, but like he keeps showing up again. It's like, hey, what the hell? And they pull some threads and keep going into it. And the tone management of this movie is, from what I saw, just excellent. Because it could be both funny and, like scary to serious, like on a dime, and it all kind of works. I don't know why I didn't revisit it. I probably should have finished it.
Oh, absolutely. Because honestly, like the more and more it goes on, you go further down the rabbit hole, and like some unexpected faces are going to pop up in there for you. But what I'm going to say about John Boyega is, because you said it's a far cry from Star Wars, I would have liked all the sequel movies 10,000 times more if they had John Boyega playing Finn like he plays his character in this. Because like he is such a badass, and he can play such a badass. Because I also like, the movie was just all right, but I liked him in the sequel to Pacific Rim. So he convincingly plays the son of Idris Elba's character from the first one, Stacker Pentecost. And as soon as I saw Pacific Rim Uprising, I was like, why isn't he like this in Star Wars? Because he's like because in Star Wars, not to go on too much of a tangent, but in Star Wars, he's like he's a deserter stormtrooper. And I'm like, you have a deserter stormtrooper that like joins the Rebel Alliance. And I'm like, that would be such an awesome character that was like kind of a hard ass, and none of them trust him, but he's disillusioned. And so he wants to like help the rebellion. And I'm like, seeing John Boyega and other stuff, I'm like, there is such a different path they could have taken with the character of Finn that would have made these sequel movies like so much, like much more elevated, in my opinion. So that was part of why I wanted to shout out They Clone Tyrone, is because he's just like, he's going to be a great leading man, I feel, once he puts some distance between himself and like the biggest thing of his career so far. And you watch movies like They Clone Tyrone, and you're just like, wow, man, like this guy's great. So
you got it.
Can't recommend this enough. This was a very, very cool movie from this year.
All right, that was your 17. My 17 is Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I assume this is one you saw in theaters?
Yes, sir.
This is directed by John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, who I believe most notably wrote the first Spider-Man Homecoming movie. I'll be honest, I don't know what they do. I just know Jonathan Francis Daley was in Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah, and they also co-wrote and directed. They wrote the first Horrible Bosses movie.
Oh, okay.
and then I believe they wrote and directed the second one. Those are really funny movies. And then obviously that second one is their connection to Chris Pine, because he plays the son of Christoph Waltz in that movie.
Gotcha. Anyway, this is I think Chris Pine is just underrated, just like one of the greatest like big budget blockbuster leading men. Between his roles in Star Wars and the number 2 in Wonder Woman, I just think, I don't know if he can really act per se, but is he a movie star? To me, he absolutely is a movie star. He's the perfect guy to lead this movie. He's just got charisma up the wazoo. Hugh Grant plays, I just love the late career arc of Hugh Grant just playing evil villains and dickheads. And this movie is, so I don't know if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons. I've played it a little bit, but this, like, it's the game, even if you never played it, it's so, I feel like so hard to make an adaptation of that game, because the game is so individualized. It's so like, everyone knows the 20-sided die. It's so dependent on like the dungeon master, and to make a movie that not only pays homage and spirit to the game, but it's just like works on his own as just like this really fun adventure movie. It's just a testament to just how well written and how well done it is. There are moments where it kind of feels like, oh yeah, that player rolled a 1 and that failed. And then there are moments where it like feels like, oh yeah, they rolled a 20 and this thing that shouldn't succeed succeeds. And it does have a lot of these little, for lack of a better word, like nerd elements and fantasy elements. This is probably a better way to say this, just like fantasy elements of this world. But yeah, this movie is just fun. It's just like really enjoyable. I didn't end up seeing the theater, but like it's definitely like I wish I did because it's perfect for that. But again, it's a big budget. Like this is the type like of movie where instead of like doing little tired, stale franchises, like I can see this like I don't know what studio made it, but like you can easily do a sequel because like if you're just gonna do Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez just going on adventures, like I'm all about it.
Yeah, man. I have never played Dungeons and Dragons myself, but I did go see this because this just made it like so accessible, and and this is one of those ones where it's like it kind of passes off as something where the IP that's attached to it is more just like, name recognition and that's it. But then you watch it and it's very accessible for people like me who've never played it. But then the people that have played Dungeons and Dragons are watching it and it is just like chock full of like good stuff. And that's the best formula for something like this, is that it's accessible to everybody. So, JFD and Jonathan Goldstein, they honestly, that like just perfect job creating this, and it is such a fun movie. And watching it like with people was super fun. And as you said, we're in like late stage Hugh Grant here, which is just like the place to be. So yeah, no, this was a very good highlight from this year.
All right, so that was my number 17. What is your number 16?
So my number 16, this is gonna start getting into the meat of my list, which is some of the difficult non-inclusions of my top 10. But for number 16, I actually have a documentary, and it is simply called The League. It is about the Negro Leagues of baseball, and I haven't read a lot about it. Like not as much as I've wanted to, and watching this movie was just so eye-opening to some of the stories about the Chicago American Giants, which was this very prominent team that kind of like was at the center of all of the different regional leagues that they had in the Negro Leagues. And so it starts with like the very, very early stories and then kind of blows up, and it really sheds a different light on the breaking of the color barrier. And because obviously, Jackie Robinson signs with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and it tells that story, but it tells it from the perspective of the Negro Leagues, which still existed after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. And there's another guy named Larry Doby who immediately came to the majors as well, very shortly after Jackie Robinson. And the movie goes into the story of like basically how the Negro Leagues ended, because all of the best black players started coming to Major League Baseball instead. But you just like, someday they're going to make an amazing movie out of like some of the big time players. And I should have read this beforehand, but the matriarch of the Negro Leagues was this woman named Ella. And again, I'm stupid, I don't remember her last name from watching the movie, but there's going to be an amazing like biopic about her someday, because the story of like how she came into like running her team was just so incredible. And if you want to hear a bunch of stories about like Bob Gibson and all these, like it was such a great, and I know we're both baseball fans here. We're both reluctant Sox fans at this point, but this was
I'm not talking about. I'm a lifelong Milwaukee Brewers fan.
I forgot. Sorry, yeah, I forgot to put your respect on the Brew Crew. But no, the league was for somebody who's a big baseball fan and a big film fan. This was definitely one of the most memorable things that I watched this year.
All right, let's dive deep into my number 16. I'm sure it's on your list. It's a little movie called Oppenheimer. To me, there are 3 movies made by some of those Hall of Fame directors that I had that to me have a lot of greatness in them, but have just too many flaws for me to put them in my top 10. But there's also too much greatness in them for me to leave them off this list. So we can delve deeper if this is further on your list.
Yeah, we'll let's save that one for later.
All right, let's where does this rank in your Nolan filmography? Because I know you are famously anti-Dark Knight, which
famously
should get you canceled, which is frankly an absurd take. But where does a film like Oppenheimer rank for you?
So first things first, I am always prepared to defend my Dark Knight takes, but in the Nolan filmography, I've seen Oppenheimer twice, and I've seen all of his movies. I caught up with Insomnia and Following, which were the only ones other than Oppenheimer, which obviously just came out this year. I saw both of those this year before going to see Oppenheimer. It is definitely in the top 5, and could be in the top 3, depending on what I'm really looking for in a Christopher Nolan movie, because which is kind of a weird thing to say, because you don't tend to think about his movies being exceptionally diverse from one another, but they actually really, really super are, especially in their time periods and especially in their use of like genre film tropes. Because obviously you have like the Batman movies, but you also have like space movies. You also have these like high concept science fiction movies. And then you have Oppenheimer, which is a straight up biopic. You have something in The Prestige, which I really love, which is like, it's a period piece, you know, but it still gets those kind of sci-fi concepts in there. So tons and tons of diversity in his filmography. But Oppenheimer, man, you're just like, I was just like glued to the screen with it. And I know, I mean, we kind of said we were going to delve into it a little bit later, but it's definitely in the top 5 for me on his filmography. And you know, who knows? Sky's the limit.
See, for me, I love, like, right off the bat, even with Following, which I cut up later, so it's Following, Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception. To me, that is right. I don't, maybe I'm missing a movie, but that run to start off his career is, to me, just like, this is a fucking incredible run you're on.
Mm-hmm.
I have no notes. Even though there might be flaws, I really love all these movies in some ways. And then he gets to The Dark Knight Rises, which, man, I literally was studying. So like, I took the bar in 2012. So like, I was literally studying all summer. I did nothing but study during the summer of 2012. Finished right before I went to take the bar. And after I finished studying, I saw The Dark Knight Rises. And I was like, really disappointed. And I like saw it 2 more times in the theaters, hoping it would be better. And there's just moments, like, there are awesome moments, and then moments that are like, man, what the heck? Come on, Nolan. And I kind of feel that about the second half of his career of not Dunkirk. I love Dunkirk, but between Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Oppenheimer, and
Tenet.
I hate Tenet, so I'm not putting that in the list. But okay. that trio of movies in the second half of his career, where you can clearly tell like you are awesome at this and you know what you're doing, and there's some awesome scenes in it. But then there's also like a lot of like, man, this should be better. This story should be better. Maybe you're doing a little bit too much. You're a little bit too cute by half. That I'm now like, I used to be super stoked for a Nolan movie, and I'll still see every single Nolan movie in the theater. Like I saw this during the Barbenheimer opening weekend. I saw Oppenheimer Friday night and Barbie Sunday afternoon that opening weekend. And there are definitely moments that I like. And again, it's on my list for a reason. But I'm now like tempering my expectations on Nolan going forward, especially considering how much I loved him to start his career. But we can get into the specifics of the movie a little bit later. But I want to have a Nolan conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And my relationship with Christopher Nolan's movies, I feel like I have to really specify it. So you mentioned The Dark Knight, and my Dark Knight take is that it is a very pretty, above average action movie, but it does not belong in the conversations that people put it in, where it's among like the greatest like superhero movies, the greatest crime movies, the greatest action movies. I feel like a lot of people saw it at a point in their lives where like superhero movies were not treated this well. And I still, to this day, I watch it and I'm able to like let go a lot of things because there's a lot of parts in The Dark Knight that I like. But The Dark Knight is emblematic of one of the things that you kind of started to mention that you kind of dislike about some of Christopher Nolan's movies, and there's something that there's some of the things that I dislike in his movies too, where because you said too cute by half, and just it comes back to Christopher Nolan the writer, because Christopher Nolan the director is like almost without peer at this point, just look at what comes out from behind the camera with him, and you're just like, how did they do this? So I'm going to talk about Tenet for a second, because I regrettably did not get to see Tenet in theaters. That was during 2020. I wanted to like go out for it, but like, it was,
he literally put out a movie in the middle of a pandemic before the vaccines were out because he's a freaking weirdo.
I mean, hey, he's trying to keep the medium alive, and it's like, okay, well, like Tom Cruise came along a little bit later and did you a solid there, buddy. But
he should have held the movie if he was like so insistent.
I'm hoping.
It was literally before a vaccine.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think it was literally before a vaccine had come out. So like, he should have fucking chilled. But
I wish he had. I'm hoping that with how like bare the schedule mostly is that we're going to start to see a lot of re-releases. So like, because like Disney's putting like the 3 Pixar movies that got put on Disney Plus, those are going to theaters next year. Which is really awesome. But so Tenet, like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Tenet is like Christopher Nolan's best movie, because it's not. There's a lot of stuff in Tenet that is like messy, but I forgive so much of it because the concept of what he had, it's not like ironclad, but it is still just like really damn interesting to try to like wrap your head around. Like I've seen that movie I think 3 times, and I'm still just like, okay, like I'm not there, but I'm along for the ride. And you watch some of those like action set pieces, like I'll be the first person to admit the ending with like the inverted pincer movement of them, like they blow up the building the same time as it like rises back. I'm like, I have no idea what the hell's going on here, but the going forwards through the airport and then backwards through the airport, and then like the inverted car chase, and just like all of the stuff in there. I'm just like, I kind of want him to make like a sequel to this movie, but I also am like, I kind of want to just like watch this like 10 more times to try and like get the grasp of it. And that's kind of what you have to be okay with Christopher Nolan, is like, none of these is going to be like, because to me, like, peak Christopher Nolan is Inception. It was just far enough out there that it is like good for his like sensibilities as a filmmaker, because he clearly is very interested in time. He's very interested in like how like corporations abuse technology. He's got his like Christopher Nolan things, and they all fit very nicely into the plot of Inception, which is not it's not as exhausting to try and like, you know, absorb as Tenet is, but it still gives you this just incredible action sequences, and it's got this amazing all-star cast. So like that's my number one Christopher Nolan movie is Inception, because just like all of the right things clicked in the right spots for him. And then like Tenet is like the version of Inception that like was a little too much Christopher Nolan and not enough like, listen, everybody, just enjoy the movie. You know what I mean?
All right. So that was my number 16 is Oppenheimer. What is your number 15?
So my number 15, again, this is going to be sort of in the meat here. And we mentioned the year of Ayo Edebiri. My unexpected entry that is probably not what you're expecting is going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem.
That is not the Ayo Edebiri movie that's on my list.
You were probably expecting Bottoms, weren't you?
Yeah, that's on my list. Yeah,
we can talk about Bottoms later. But I am a giant fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this. This was a super fun movie. There were some things that I liked about it, some things I loved about it, some things I was just like, like whatever. But it's a very unique, different version of the Turtles than what you've seen. And my favorite part about it is that they are genuinely like teenagers, because you watch like the old suit ones from the 90s, and then you watch the Michael Bay ones from the 2010s, and it's just like, this is like young adult, like this is like early 20s Ninja Turtles, Mutant Ninja Turtles, like this was like genuinely like 11, 12, 13-year-olds as the voices of the Turtles, and it just like bleeds through so well. And Ayo Edebiri plays April O'Neil. She's the voice of April, and she like does a great job carrying her own with like all the Turtle characters. Ice Cube is the bad guy, which is hilarious. And yeah, just a super fun animated movie that is getting overshadowed by another movie that I feel like we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, there is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle series on Netflix that my son got really into, and we had a nanny that like helped us out a couple of days a week, and she's like in her early 20s and like loves the Turtles too. So she took my oldest son, he's 6, to see this movie, and just he sounded like he loved it. He got a big giant like popcorn container of like it's like a sewer can, trash can type thing full of popcorn, and he sounds like he had a great time. I remember soon after, like there was a ice cream truck going down the street, and like they have little characters on the popsicles, and so my son was like, "You got to get the Ninja Turtle one with like the gumball." And there were other kids like, "Oh, did you see the movie? I love the movie." So like anecdotally, it seems like the kids also love this movie too. But yeah, I heard it got great reviews. I'm not a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle guy. I'm glad my son had fun without
me. Me and your son, we both had a good time with it.
My number 15 is Air, a little film starring Matt Damon, directed by Ben Affleck, that on paper sounds absolutely dumb. Of just like, how did the Michael Jordan come to endorse the shoe? And it does have a little bit to me. It's like, yeah, this all worked out really, really well. The Jordans are doing really well. My son wears the Jordans, and clearly this worked out really well for Nike. But Ben Affleck is just really good at this. He's really good at story. Matt Damon is just really good at acting. He's just like obviously it's, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. The two obviously have great chemistry. It's always great when they're on screen together. And Ben Affleck, just like I didn't see Live by Night, but I feel like there's just always a high floor for his movies. And like, I have different love. Like, I don't love The Town as much as other people, but I love Gone Baby Gone more than others. But regardless, it's a Ben Affleck movie that stars Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Just sign me up. And I was going to say that because this movie came out early in the year, if it came out a little bit later in the year, it might get Oscar buzz, but this movie also just got a whole bunch of Golden Globe nominations out of nowhere. So like maybe this movie like weirdly will get Oscar nods, but it's a really good year for movies. So like I get it, but man, Air just feels like it's going to be a movie for everyone. If you haven't seen Air, it's currently streaming on Amazon Prime right now. Really solid, really enjoyable film, and just Matt Damon and Jason Bateman being charming AF.
Yeah, I did get to see this in theaters before it got on Amazon Prime because this was an Amazon Prime movie at Amazon Studios, and it's got a chance to sneak in there with like one Oscar nomination because Viola Davis plays Michael Jordan's mom, and she's really great. But yeah, this was it did not make my list because I have this thing where I'll watch a movie about something that really happened, and you mentioned that like this is the year of like biopics of products, and and this is like one of like the big ones, and some of them sometimes they venture into the territory of just like, well, this happened, here you go, and they don't really go further than that. And I wouldn't say that this movie did that, but this movie is definitely more of a like, it's more of like a love letter to like all of it than it is like the story, like this I enjoyed this movie a lot. I watched it twice. Like, it is funny. I love a good like R-rated script, and this is definitely that. Like, just this was a good time. Didn't crack my list, but this was very much a good time, I think.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. With the thing that I really hate about biopics is when so many of them turn into what I call Wikipedia entries, where it kind of feels like, here's a paragraph of here's what happened, and this is in the movie because here's what happened. And I didn't necessarily feel the way about Air because at least it felt like a coherent story of the Matt Damon character, who's based on a real person who I forgot his name, but it doesn't really matter. Just call him Matt Damon. Where it's like him of like noticing Jordan and just like trying to court him to get the shoe, and it all felt like a coherent story to me, which is to me a real strength of just Ben Affleck's direction, of just like, George Clooney is going to have a movie come out this year, and he's another actor turned director who, like, I hate his movies because it feels like he doesn't understand stories, and I haven't seen The Boys in the Boat, Clooney's movie, so like I'm not going to judge it. But generally speaking, I really dislike Clooney's movies because it feels like he doesn't have a good understanding of story structure, whereas Ben Affleck feels like the opposite, where that's why to me there's always a high bar, because it feels like Affleck like really knows what he's doing when it comes to this. And I just think it's enjoyable. I can see why it wouldn't make someone's list, but I also think that if you haven't seen it yet, you're also going to enjoy it.
Oh yeah.
Like, to anyone listening, it's like, if you haven't seen Air, I promise you, no matter who you are, if like, hey, you want to see it with your parents or just by yourself, significant other, just everyone can enjoy Air.
Big time crowd pleaser for sure.
Yeah. So that was my 15. What is your 14?
My 14. So I seriously doubt you're going to have a slide for this one. My 14 is a Korean movie called The Roundup No Way Out.
Never heard of it.
So I had to drive a long distance to go see this movie when it came out. It is the third movie in a series of Korean movies starring Don Lee, who, if American audiences would know him most either from Eternals because he plays Gilgamesh, or if you've seen the movie Train to Busan, he's in that, and he plays the husband with his wife is pregnant. Okay. So he's like the big muscle bound guy, and this is just straight up. So it's like a Korean like crime movie, and in the series he plays this cop, who and it's so interesting to watch him because the police don't carry guns in South Korea. So when they have to like, break up criminals and stuff, there's, they've got like their sticks and whatnot. And in the movies that plays out as like martial arts, right? That's like the kind of the basis for a lot of martial arts movies. And in this, he's just this big dude, because if you ever see him, you see what he looks like. He's just this gigantic, like thick dude with like no neck, and his character is this just complete no nonsense. Just like if you talk to him for too long and like he's tired of it, he's just gonna like smack you upside the head and you're just gonna get knocked out and he's gonna be done with you. Like he is so entertaining as like this like weird pseudo leading man, because he just carries these movies with just like his like whatever. And I'm doing a horrible job of expressing it, but like if you're into like action movies and like kind of action police movies, like this is it. It's not super stylized. It's not like Jackie Chan, like his like early stuff where like he's like super cop and he's like flying all over the place. Like it's more grounded than that, but it is just like funny entertainment, like good action movie, good crime movie, and it just entertained the hell out of me. So the first movie in the series is called The Outlaws, which this is kind of funny. It's kind of, we've been talking about Christopher Nolan. It's kind of like how like it was like Batman Begins, and then everybody calls it like the Dark Knight trilogy. The first movie is called The Outlaws. The second movie is called The Roundup. And the third movie is called The Roundup No Way Out. And then there's going to be a Roundup 4 that's supposed to come out in 2024. So if you're into that kind of thing, very, very, very fun little series of movies that you can watch and just like have a good time with.
Awesome. I'll go super quick with my 14. It is the only documentary on the list. It is called Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. It is streaming on Apple TV Plus, and it is a documentary in the life of Michael J. Fox, and it's basically just tells a story like of his career. And obviously he's got Parkinson's, right?
Yeah.
And so it intercuts with his like what is going on with how he's living right now, which is just really sad and tragic to see, considering he was just one of the most charming actors of his generation. And Michael J. Fox is such an interesting character, and it's led such an interesting life that it leads to an obviously interesting movie. But the film also very smartly intercuts and takes scenes from his filmography and puts it in the movie in a really smart and cinematic way that if you have any sort of interest, even if you just sort of like the Back to the Future movies, highly recommend this if you have Apple TV Plus. That is my 14.
Yeah, I did not get a chance to check that one out. I don't have Apple TV Plus at this point, but the amount of quality things that keep on landing on there, I'm going to have to get it at some point. And yeah, I do. I love Back to the Future and love Michael J. Fox. So yeah, that's another one I'll definitely be getting to at some point.
My next couple movies are also going to be going to come to Apple TV Plus. So if you don't have it, just a way to rewatch my next couple movies. But right now, what's your number 13?
My number 13 is Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3.
This is my number 4, but let's talk about it now.
So it's obviously does not crack my top 10. But as we go on further, you're going to realize that that's because, to me, there was just so much depth this year that not everything can make the list, right? So I loved this movie. I'm one of the crazy people, like you talked about my Dark Knight take. My favorite Guardians movie is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I love that movie so much, and I feel like everybody who has like this like hollow memory of it has not rewatched it since Avengers Endgame came out. And you go back and watch that. There is some great stuff with Nebula and Gamora. There's some great stuff with Nebula and Rocket. Basically, a lot of great stuff with Nebula in a lot of ways, and the stuff with Yondu and Quill, like just that movie. I've loved it since it came out. And then so watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I was just like not like super hardcore emotional with like saying goodbye to the characters, but it's still a very emotional experience, having seen them like go through everything that we've seen them go through. And then separate from that, it is just a killer sci-fi action space movie, and one of the best villains that the Marvel universe has gotten in a very, very long time with the High Evolutionary. He was just, yeah. Chukwudi Iwuji.
Chukwudi Iwuji.
Yeah.
He's in the Peacemaker show.
Peacemaker,
which is
yes.
James Gunn show. And,
Peacemaker's awesome too.
Yeah, I just think James Gunn is the best action director working right now. His ability to, especially in the superhero genre, of just like, this movie's going to be fun, but this movie's also going to be a little bit deeper with themes, and it's all going to work together, and it's all going to be coherent. And I think the fact that like so many, especially this year, it's so hard. It feels like, because you have to serve so many masters to make just a coherent superhero movie. And I do think part of it is the fact is that Marvel just kind of left James Gunn alone. We're like, we're sorry we fired you. Just, here, finish out the trilogy anyway. And this might be my favorite Guardians movie. And I think your two take is crazy. To me, that's the worst one. But man, I really like this movie. I dug it a lot. I saw it in theaters and then rewatched it again when it came to Disney Plus. And like, I love this movie. The stuff of, it's basically just saving Rocket intercut with Rocket's past. And it all works to me. It's funny, it's heartbreaking, it's emotional. I love Gunn's use of music in the movies, and to update it with the 90s, and it starts off with Rocket walking to Creep. It's just like, all that shit works on me. And it also feels like, I don't know, I think he didn't want Nebula to die. I don't think that was ever part of the plan. I think 3 was probably supposed to come out before Endgame. And the fact that he was able to deal with Adam Warlock, which he set up at the end of 2, and set up the worlds that the MCU created, and still stay true to all these characters and their relations with each other, and then create all these new characters with the Rocket and the other animals in his timeline. It all works on me. This movie it's emotional, it's funny, it's sad, it's joyful. I love the one-shot fight scene. It's one of my favorite fight scenes of the year, set to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. I think this movie is just incredible, and that's why it's number 4 for me.
Yeah, people aren't ready to have this conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Bradley Cooper's best performance of the year.
I mean, I also didn't like Maestro, but
I'm still digesting Maestro, but man, yeah. Guardians 3. Great movie. Right.
My number 13 is, as I alluded to, it is a movie that will eventually come to Apple TV Plus, and that is Ridley Scott's Napoleon, with Joaquin Phoenix as the titular Napoleon. as I also talked about with Oppenheimer, there's a trio of movies from great directors that work a lot, but also have a lot of flaws. And to me, that's the point where, again, talk about great scenes of the year, the Battle of Austerlitz that Ridley Scott was able to film that comes like halfway through or a little before is to me the best scene of the year. It's incredible. It was that alone is worth the price of admission. Um, you look throughout Ridley Scott's career, and to me, that's what he does best is these big battle set pieces, whether it's Gladiator, all the stuff where Russell Crowe in the ring, or the where shit goes to hell in Black Hawk Down, to the titular last duel, to all the stuff in space with the Martian. Like when Ridley Scott has money to stage these huge set pieces, to me, that's when he's best, and no one is getting money to do that. And the battle at the beginning where a cannon friggin' hits Napoleon's horse. And I was like, oh God, like I almost audibly went damn in the theater. Like that stuff is just incredible. But where the flaw for me comes in is that so much of this movie is just like this weird Yorgos Lanthimosian, like weird duet between Vanessa Kirby's Josephina and Napoleon, and like so much of the movie is spent about them trying to have a baby, and it was weird and funnier than I would have expected. Like there's a moment where Joaquin Phoenix literally is like neighing like a horse before he's about to have sex. And some of it, like it worked for me for a little bit, and then it just got to be too much. And so that's why it didn't break the top 10 for me. But man, it's also like, how do you tell a story about Napoleon? Like it almost should have been maybe a mini series if you wanted to tell a true story. Like Napoleon has just lived such a grand, fantastic life that you weren't going to get all of it even in like a 3-hour movie. But there's so much to love in large part because of how Ridley Scott is able to stage action pieces, and Joaquin Phoenix is great in this movie that I have it at number 12.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you in terms of it being like, one of those things from like this master that you're so used to. And even when it's like not their like their highest ranking thing, it just like really hits solidly. So Napoleon did not crack my list, but I did really enjoy it. I like you mentioned like the comedy aspects of it. That was like super unexpected, but it just good. Like because the part where he yells at the English guy and he's like, "You guys would think you're so great just because you have boats," like just like. And Joaquin Phoenix is like the perfect actor to say like hilarious dialogue, completely serious in a setting like this where he's dressed like Napoleon, he's wearing the giant hat, and then he's just like screaming like oh man, he's definitely
God has brought me this pork chop.
Yes, that was good. So like he just does the part perfect. I have this weird thing, like, so one of my biggest pet peeves in movies is when like and I think we talked about this before, it's where it's like a scene where like two people from like whatever. So like in this movie, it would have been two French people and they're speaking English to ejust other. I'm like, you should be speaking French to each other. But there's a lot of movies that do that. And this is one of them. And I'm like, I'll just get over it, but it's still a pet peeve of mine. But with that being said, the result was that you get to have Joaquin Phoenix playing Napoleon, and he's a big reason why this worked. What I'll say just very quickly about it is that this is going to be one where the Apple Plus, pays off for you because it's going to have that extended cut that comes out, which is supposed to be like an extra hour longer than what the movie was once it lands on Apple Plus. That was the whole big deal with Ridley Scott, because the one that played in theaters was like 2 hours and 37 minutes, something like that. And the director's cut, which Ridley Scott is, he's famous for his director's cuts. And they've already said that, yeah, we're giving you the full version on Apple. So that's part of the reason why this didn't make my list, is because in my mind, it's like, we haven't even actually seen it yet. We haven't seen like the real vision yet. So whenever that comes out, I'm for sure going to be checking it out because I enjoyed this, enough that I would watch it again. And I know that I would enjoy more because you've got like the famous, like extra long versions of like Blade Runner and Kingdom of Heaven, where it's like, wow, this is like so much better. So I feel like we're going to have like a treat in store later for people who are willing to sit through a longer version of Napoleon.
Yeah, so Napoleon is my number 13. So what is your 12?
My number 12. And this is getting into the top tier here. So my number 12 is John Wick Chapter 4.
Didn't see it.
Oh, bummer, dude. So I won't say too much because frankly, there's not like all that much to say. If you've seen any of the John Wick movies, you basically know it is just like wall to wall action set pieces. And this movie is damn near 3 hours long. But there is just like so much craziness going on. And because I thought that like John Wick 3 could not be topped because he's got like have you seen any of the John Wick movies?
I only saw the first one.
Okay. Well, so the first 3 movies all take place over the course of like a week. And then a little more time has passed, like a little more time, but not that much. Because again, honestly, all of these movies just take place pretty much back to back to back. And in John Wick Chapter 4, they did some things that I'm like, how did no one actually die? There's a scene, I believe it's the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, where there's this big fight going on with all of like where the cars like drive around in there.
Right.
And like there's this fight where the dudes are fighting in the street at these cars, and you just keep on seeing people get hit by cars, and every single time it's just like, oh my God, like it's just one of the craziest action movies I've ever seen. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous colors and photography. I don't even know if it's my favorite John Wick movie, but like just an unbelievable accomplishment in terms of just like going balls to the wall with an action movie and delivering on just some of the craziest things you've ever seen.
Yeah, the John Wick movies aren't for me, but I do feel like John Wick 4 has like universal acclaim.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody who watches that movie is like, yeah, this movie is just amazing. And you're not the first person I've heard mention that Arc de Triomphe scene. So maybe I'll check it out. There was just like the reason like I saw one and it was just like after like the 50th headshot, I'm like, okay, I get it. They're coming in, you get like, let's get a movie. Maybe I should probably check them out. My number 12, I assume will be later on your list. So if we want to pause this discussion, it's Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon.
We can have this talk now because I'm gonna spoil you here. Not on my list.
Oh, this is the third movie of like a really good movie from a great director that just has flaws. And so to me, the best Martin Scorsese movies are about these men who have to use criminality to get their way because they're outside of the system and they have to do their best. Whether it's Jordan Belfort in Wolf of Wall Street or it's the mafia in Goodfellas, it's these men who have to use criminality to get their way in. And Killers of the Flower Moon, Scorsese inverts it a little bit by the white men have the power, but are using their criminality to get to these this Indian tribal community in order to steal their money. And it's the Scorsese-ness of it all that like really I love a lot. And this is a movie that's coming to Apple TV Plus that I really just want to watch again. And it's outside my top 10 because there are moments where I saw this in the theater where I was like just kind of bored. And I was like, man, I know you can pace your movies well, Scorsese. You literally have an Academy Award winning editor. And even for long movies like Wolf of Wall Street, I still find very well paced. There's just the argument is that there's too many scenes. It's the pacing of this movie that I was like, this kind of rubs me the wrong way. Um, I also will say that there was so much hype about this movie, and like part of it is my like I hyped it up so much, and so much was like this is an incredible book, and it's about the forming of the FBI, and it's not really like that at all because Scorsese changed it. Um, but to me, it's just there's too much Martin Scorsese in it for me to leave it out of my list at all. I just think there's so many incredible aspects of it. Um, I mean, it's also frustrating watching Robert De Niro act like this and be like, why are you take? I get it, like you want money, but like, do you really need another Dirty Grandpa movie when you can be like the best actor in the world, like with a performance like this? And like, even though the CGI didn't work in The Irishman, it's like, man, you and Scorsese very obviously have something going on. That like, why aren't you doing this more often? And to me, it's weird that because there was a point where I heard Jesse Plemons was going to play the lead character, and then DiCaprio was like, no, I'm taking it. And there is this moment where I think DiCaprio's incredible in it, but I also wish Jesse Plemons was it because this character is supposed to be so much younger. Like DiCaprio's almost like 50, if not at least 50, playing like a 20-year-old, which that always bugs me the wrong way. It's like at least Jesse Plemons looks that age and I know can act well. But for all of that flaws, and there are many flaws, I just think, man, it's fucking Martin Scorsese. I guess I love that too much for me to, and I get why this would make your top 23 because of the flaws, but it's my number 12.
Yeah. So I got to see this when I was on. My wife and I were on vacation in California. We wanted to go see it in the Chinese theater that did not come together for us, but we still got to go see it out at the AMC out there. And I didn't have as much problem with the pacing necessarily, but after I digested it, I was like, so first of all, I took a big issue with in the last like third of the movie, Molly, Lily Gladstone, his wife, how she's totally sidelined. And because she's ill, I mean, we won't get into spoilers, I guess, right now, but like she's like totally sidelined for a huge chunk of the movie. And the problems that I have is that Scorsese and DiCaprio are talking about it as if they made this movie that portrays the Osage like so well and so tragically and like tells their story. But in reality, the movie that they made is 3.5 hours long. And in my opinion, it portrays the Osage like they're all idiots.
Yeah, they are all rubes and dum-dums.
And what I would have liked to see, because clearly, because you mentioned this, they changed what the movie was going to be in pre-production. It was going to be more like the book, which is about the formation of the FBI, and Leonardo DiCaprio was going to play the character that Jesse Plemons plays, which is like the agent that actually comes down to investigate the murders. But then they pivoted away from like the crime investigation movie, which it was going to be, and instead they pivoted to the actual murders themselves. And what I did not enjoy was that it is basically it is damn near 4 hours long, and almost all of it focuses on the antagonists of the story, with De Niro and DiCaprio and like all the people they're friends with. And when you had that much runtime, I would have like if they had actually made the movie that they talk like they made, then so much, especially in the second half of it, would have been dedicated more to the actual Osage characters. And especially because, at one point, Ernest, DiCaprio's character, like he's in jail, And if they had taken that time to spend more time with like Lily Gladstone, his wife, then it's much more balanced. I talked about The Departed with it, and how The Departed is like truly a two-hander, and you have DiCaprio and Matt Damon, and you getting like really both sides of both of their stories, and you don't ever feel gypped in terms of one of their stories versus the other. And in this one, it is an hour longer than The Departed, but you don't get any of the duality. I felt that you just get really, really gypped in terms of the more important side of the story that you wanted to see.
Yeah, so like if you wanted to tell this true story, you probably should have had someone of Osage or at least American Indian descent. You know, like the Starlin Harjo, who does the creator of Reservoir Dogs, a show that I love. Like, would he have probably been a more appropriate story to tell the Osage story? Yeah, probably 100%. And like I get that criticism totally. Like this is a Hollywood version of representation, which is just kind of like not going full all the way. But to me, it's like it's also like it's Martin Scorsese. I'm not going to tell Martin Scorsese how to direct a movie and what story to
right.
tell. So that's why like I look at it from like this is a Martin Scorsese Leonardo DiCaprio movie. This isn't necessarily a movie about the Osage. It's like Martin Scorsese trying to do that, which is he's an old white guy. Like there's going to be problems. I 100% get that. And if you like again, if you're of like Indian or Osage like descent, I think that's a super valid criticism, and I totally get that. But like that flaw that you have is like the feature that I have is like it's a Martin Scorsese movie, and for better or for worse, it's a Martin Scorsese movie, and the floor, especially for these type of movies that he makes, is just always so high for me that I love him, and I'm gonna watch this movie again when it comes to Apple, and I'll probably watch it a few more times because I think he's great.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I was just talking about this with my wife. Like, I definitely want to see it again to like help kind of formulate some of my thoughts on it. And maybe I have like warped too much of it, like since watching it. But you're spot on when you talk about how like quality of a movie it is, with just by the fact that it's a Martin Scorsese movie. You know, like there's just an inherent, and what's crazy is like you watch what he's doing so late in his career and how many other people like are not able to do as great a work as late in their career as he does. And so it's just like, honestly, I'm just happy that we're still getting movies from him at all. So yeah, that's 100%. So yeah, absolutely.
Listen, if he wants to trick like huge streamers and to give him $300 million, who am I to tell no?
Exactly.
I don't know how many there are left, but again, get the money while you can. So that was my number 12. What's your number 11? And
my number 11, just outside the top 10. This might surprise you from what we have talked about in the past, but my number 11 is going to be The Holdovers.
I knew it was going to make your list. I thought it was going to be like top 5.
It not quite top 5, and this and John Wick 4, it was like, man, you know, at one point you and I were like, oh, maybe we'll do a top 12, whatever, you know, and it was so hard to just like get just 10 movies this year, and one of the reasons why is talking about The Holdovers. You and I have discussed this. I love Paul Giamatti. He is my favorite actor. He is so underrated. He is one of the best leading men that we have going right now, and people don't associate him with being a leading man because he's so often in these background roles, but this guy is just the best. I friggin' love him. And The Holdovers is such a perfect holiday movie because it is so like tight as a drama, but it is also so funny and heartwarming in all of the right ways. And you have these 3, you know, like mismatched characters, like, which is something that Alexander Payne just like does such a good job with. And like, honestly, like there's not really a whole lot to say besides this is just like a perfect seasonal movie that goes above and beyond being a seasonal movie, because a lot of seasonal movies are just like, oh, we're gonna like get this Thanksgiving weekend money, and then it's gonna play on cable every couple of years. Like people are gonna come back to it. But this is a legitimately great movie that is also a holiday movie, and Paul Giamatti is just the man. And the rest of the like, especially the other two characters, like it just great performances, great entertainment, great like vibes. It's out in
New England.
It's outside of Boston. Because at one point they travel to Boston. Like, yeah, so it's just very, very, very good vibes, good seasonal holiday type movie. Alexander Payne, you can't go wrong. So yeah, I just like enjoyed the hell out of this movie.
Yeah, you and I were DMing about this. I do feel a little bit bad afterwards because I felt like I hope you didn't take it as like me criticizing you, because like I do get why people like this movie, and I do get why you would like this movie. So I hope my criticisms didn't come as an attack towards you.
No.
This is definitely the type of movie where I always think of like, what movie would my dad like? What movie like could I watch with my wife? And I think The Holdovers definitely is one of those as well, where I think this, like, no matter who you have in your life, if you want to sit down, like, hey, what do we want to watch? Oh, The Holdovers just got released or whatnot. Or like, oh, the Oscars nominations came out and Holdovers just got a bunch. Let's check it out. This is definitely the type of family-friendly, or not necessarily family-friendly per se, but it's definitely the type of movie where it's like a crowd pleaser. It's like meant for everyone.
Yeah. And that's kind of why it's not in my top 10, because like it was nothing groundbreaking, and it works for me because there's so many, like, especially like it's got my favorite actor in it. It's got a director I love. So it's like, like that's why it kind of works for me. And that's why it's ranked here and not necessarily in my top.
All right. A film that I would not recommend watching with your significant other or relative who doesn't necessarily enjoy movies is Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things. I love Lanthimos as a director. I've only seen 5 of his movies. Granted, most of his movies, he's a Greek director. Most of his movies are in Greek. And the only one I have seen is of those is Dogtooth, which is delightfully messed up. I don't know if you've seen it, but that is my favorite Lanthimos movie. He also did The Lobster, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and The Favorite. So he reunites with Emma Stone from The Favorite. Did this make your list at all?
So my wife and I went and saw this last night. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I found it to be very, very funny, and I loved the progression of the character. And I don't want to go into spoilers because it just came out, so a lot of people don't even really know like kind of what the story is with Bella, her character. So all I'll say is I have not thrown it on the list. Even I toyed with like having it in the lower end. I figured you were going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to focus more on stuff that's like going to be underseen, and this is going to be nominated for all kinds of Academy Awards. We already know this. So I knew we were going to get a chance to talk about it anyway. So I wanted to go other areas on my list, but like, this is definitely one that's going to be like if I was doing like a whole top 25, this would definitely sneak in there. She's great. I kind of wish that she had not won the Oscar for La La Land, because then I'd be like full bore Emma Stone train for this performance, because she's just like, man, she went crazy with this one.
Yeah. So I was like trying to explain it to my wife, because this movie I knew was just going to be too weird for her, so I'll just see it by myself. I actually saw it with a friend, but it's basically starts off as like a Frankenstein story where William Dafoe plays this Dr. Frankenstein type character, and Bella, played by Emma Stone, basically plays Frankenstein's monster. But basically, so what happens is that he puts a child's brain into Emma Stone, a 30-year-old woman's body, and then reanimates her. And so you see this progression of Emma Stone becoming a child to a woman. And Lanthimos uses that as a way to, in his own weird way, to tell the story of womanhood in the world. And I likened it to this is Barbie, but with graphic nudity, because Emma Stone, holy shit, does she go for it? And I really appreciate the choices that Emma Stone makes, where like this movie is not only weird because it's a Lanthimos movie, but she is naked a lot. And she is an Oscar winner. She does not have to, and she goes for it. And I appreciate like that. And also, if you're the studio, you can sell the movie based upon Stone's fame. And I think she's just had a really interesting latter part of her career where she can do something like the what was it, Cruella de Vil prequel. I didn't watch that movie, but like,
yeah, me neither.
Oh my god. She hates dogs because Dalmatians killed her mom or something. And I was like, nope, I'm not. That is too dumb for me. But regardless, it's just like, I think she's playing fame kind of in her career perfectly, where she can do a big movie like that. And then she can do these weirder movies. Like she's in the Cursed TV show now, and she can do a Yorgos Lanthimos movie. Mark Ruffalo eventually whisks her off her feet. And I thought he was absolutely incredible. Like he's going to get nominated for an Oscar. I'm like, God damn, man. Like if the friggin' MCU hadn't sucked him up for 10, 15 years, like what other projects could he have done? Because he was really good before the MCU with like Eternal Sunshine and, shows up in Collateral. But like, I thought Ruffalo was just incredible and he's so funny. But the reason this movie didn't crack my top 10 is because the first half, I was just vibing with it. I was like, this is a Yorgos Lanthimos movie. This is perfectly weird. I love it. It's funny. It has a point. The set design is like Wes Anderson-esque almost. I thought it was fantastic, and the costume design was fantastic. But then as Emma Stone starts to learn more and more and become more of a woman, and especially like once the movie, they get off the boat and enter France, I was like, the comedy stops working for me. The movie starts to become more serious as Mark Ruffalo kind of leaves the frame. It's like, okay, I kind of get what you're doing and I understand the themes you're going with, but this isn't working for me as well. And again, partially this is like, I saw this movie, it started at 10:30, so it really started at 11. By the end, when it was like 12:31, I was like, this movie needs to fucking end. Like, it introduces a character out of the blue and spends a really long scene with him. And I'm like, bro, let's move this along. I get where you're going from this. This movie should have ended half an hour ago. Let's go. And so that's why I didn't crack my top 10 for the second half. But like the length, most of it all really works for me. And it's weird, and expect it to be weird if you're going to check it out.
Yeah, great vibes. I definitely expect it to be weird. Laugh out loud funny in a lot of parts. It's gonna pretty twisted. Lots of like body humor and lots of like there is just like tons of sex. Like I'm just like, if you don't know this about this movie going in, you're gonna be just like absolutely floored. There is like so much freaking sex in this. It is like, whew.
It is graphic.
Yeah.
All right. Now, after 2 hours of discussing, we are finally in our top 10. Let's go.
Okay. My number 10. My number 10 is going to be Anatomy of a Fall.
I'm so jealous you've seen this movie. Speak on it.
So, I've said this like 4 times. I'm going to try not to give away too much, but Anatomy of a Fall is set in this house. Well, I mean, part of it set in this house up in the French Alps, and it is a couple who are writers, and they live there with their son, who is hearing impaired, he's visually impaired because of an accident that happened to him when he was younger. He's like, I think he's like 10 or 12 or 11 years old. And he leaves to walk the dog after while his parents are like getting in an argument. And when he comes back from walking the dog, he finds his father's body just laying in the snow. And the rest of the movie plays out as investigating the cause of death. It has come to be suspected that the mother may have, murdered him, and where the meat of the story is the investigation and the trial, and absolutely going through every aspect of their life and not trying to prove what did or didn't happen, but trying to prove what could have happened in the eyes of the people that have to judge this, which is a jury and a court in France. And there is enough mystery to it that it is going to really wet your whistle if you're like me and you really love that kind of movie. But it also is not about like the mystery and finding a twist necessarily. It's about just the horror that you're going to realize when you put a microscope under anybody's life. And the way that this delivers the thrills and surprises that it has, which again, it's I don't want to set the expectation that it's like this like mystery that you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like I figured it out, because it really is not like that. But there's enough of that combined with just this intense drama and this amazing performance from Sandra Hüller is the actress that plays the mother, and her son, his name is Milo Granger, I think is what his name. Like just the performances that they turn in are just so powerful, and it is so well written and compelling to like watch and see from like different angles and stuff. Like it's honestly, it's like it's gonna get like a bunch of Oscar nominations. I hope it ends up in the best pictures because I want more people to see it. I'm the only person I know that has seen it like among like my friend group, so I haven't been able to like talk about the ending with people. So I just hope a lot more people see this very soon.
And I love a good courtroom drama. I'm very jealous. I do want to see this. It looks like it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year.
Yeah.
So pretty good resume. So my number 10 is Todd Haynes' May December. I think the only other Todd Haynes movie I had seen was Carol, which I did not care for. So I'm not really familiar with him as his directorial style per se. But this is a movie that was made independently and picked up by Netflix. So kudos for Netflix for, this is like not like my dad watched this and was like, did you like this movie? It's like, eh. It is essentially the Mary Kay Letourneau story where Julianne Moore plays a woman who in her 30s had sex with her 12-year-old student. And this is some 20 years later. Yeah, 20 years because and her student is played by an actor who I wasn't intimately familiar with. His name is Charles Melton. He was most famous for being on Riverdale, a show I'd never seen. And they are married now, and Natalie Portman plays an actress who they're making a movie about the story, and Natalie Portman is essentially playing a character who is Julianne Moore, and so comes to their house, and it's Charleston, right? Yeah. Savannah, Georgia. And kind of throws a grenade into their lives. But one, I thought Charles Melton was just absolutely incredible, especially the last half hour of the movie becomes his movie, where he's very quiet and underplays his character and then kind of explodes at the end. But what I love about this movie is Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, just incredible, especially for me, Julianne Moore. just absolutely killing it. I don't know if either of them are even going to get Oscar nominations, but to me, they're both worthy. And it's a story of like who is like they're both putting on a show. Both Julianne Moore is putting on the show for the world in real life, and Natalie Portman is this actress who's just very over the top trying to get to play this character. And who is doing a better job acting of playing this woman? And even though there's some on the nose symbolism, especially Charles Melton, he's a gardener and like deals with like bugs that are butterflies. And it's like, oh, okay, Todd Haynes, relax. Like we all get it. we all get this busting out of cocoon. But this movie is also funny. There's a really funny joke at the very beginning about hot dogs. I'm not going to spoil the punchline that is really enjoyable. And I just think the story is really interesting. And I love the way Todd Haynes tells it, where it's a little bit like arty farty. But I just think like he tells the story he needs to. He kind of gets in and gets out. And just a really good snapshot of these characters that just like I really dug and really stayed with me. And I know this isn't in your top 23 at all, but man, like I really dig this movie. I'm thinking about this movie. That's what movies should do, man. It should make you like think about it more, and that's why I really enjoyed it, and I have it in my top 10.
Yeah, it didn't crack my list, but I enjoyed it. I was extremely like happy I watched it after seeing so much buzz, and you personally recommended that I get to it, and so I made sure that I did. And very, very darkly funny, as you mentioned. Like some of the line deliveries are just so funny, and I liked what you said about Todd Haynes, because like I like that it's like a elevated. It's like stylistically it plays like a Lifetime movie with it's one of the most memorable scores of the year to me, because the score is just like a total riff on like this like super like over dramatic TV movie type score that you would hear, and you listen to it and you're just like, why does it sound like they're about to catch the killer right now?
It's very jarring.
But it sticks out, and for me it stuck out in a good way. I enjoyed those aspects of it, and you're absolutely correct. Charles Melton was like the movie does not work at all without him for me. He was just so fantastic. So yeah, like very, very like one of the more like movies of the year that needs to really be discussed for sure.
Absolutely. All right, what is your number 9?
My number 9 was my number 1 most anticipated movie of the year. Not super high on my list, but still in the top 10, and that is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. So I love these movies. All of them. I am here for all of them. Did you see this movie?
No, not yet.
Okay, so
I don't have Paramount Plus, and it's on Paramount Plus, and I'm like,
oh, it's streaming on there. I saw this twice in theaters. So without saying too much about the plot, besides the fact that there were moments in this where I'm like, this is the best one of these movies. Have you seen the other ones?
Yeah, I've seen the other 6.
Okay, so Mission Impossible Fallout is in my top 10 movies of all time. I think it is one of the 2 or 3 best action movies ever made. That is like a classic that people...
Is that the Henry Cavill one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he charges his arms. He cocks his arms.
Yeah. That is so... I love that movie to death. I've watched it like so many friggin' times. So I was just beyond stoked for this one coming out. I don't think that it suffered from my expectations, because I have some legitimate criticisms of it. I won't dive too deep into them because again, I don't want to give anything away necessarily, but the action that is going on in this movie, dude, it's like, it is just out of this world, and especially at the end. So and you and I have talked about the Mission Impossible movies before, just like outside, and in a lot of ways, this is a love letter to the very, very first movie, because there's a lot of very similar like tropes, and then a lot of very visual nods to the first one, and that includes the ending, which is all on this train, right? And the train sequence from Mission Impossible 1 is very, very famous. Obviously, and Ethan does like the gum and like it explodes and the helicopter and everything, and it's great. So in this one, him and Haley Atwell's character Grace have to escape from the train when it is partially falling off of a cliff. And what they did in this sequence is gonna blow your damn mind. It is, and the thing is, it's a Tom Cruise movie. You watch it and you're just like, they did all of this. They did absolutely all of this, and you're just, it is just, even though it's not my favorite of the series, it just absolutely delivers as an action movie. And you're just gonna like, because like they spent all the marketing budget on the motorcycle jump. And I'm like, okay, so that happens. You're like, all right. I mean, I've basically seen this a million times, but then everything that's after that, you're just like, so yeah. Gotta see this movie, and I can't wait till they make another one.
Yeah, this is a movie that probably was hurt a little bit at the box office because it came a week before Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
So Tom Cruise maybe overshot his shot after Top Gun with the box office. But I am excited. I mean, these movies all hinge on the set pieces, and sounds like the set pieces don't disappoint.
No, they do not. And honestly, the set pieces by themselves were enough to buoy this, because like, and you know what? I was about to say something else that I don't even want to say that, because like the trailers kind of hide in plain sight, like the story of the villain, and it's just, it needs to be seen. And the action set pieces are enough just completely on their own to say like, this is just one of the most memorable things from this year.
Awesome. My number 9 is another Netflix movie called Leave the World Behind. This is technically the second film by Sam Esmail, but he's an experienced director because he is the man behind Mr. Robot. And I think he ended up directing like all of the second season and beyond of that show. He also has worked with Julia Roberts before on the show's Homecoming, which I love the podcast. The show is just kind of and a show called Gaslit, which is really weird that a show came out in like 2022 starring Julia Roberts and nobody saw it. But this, in Leave the World Behind, it's Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke play a couple in Brooklyn who decide to vacation out in Long Island. And then things start to go awry soon after the owner of the house that they're renting from, played by Mahershala Ali, and his daughter Mahala, who's in, I don't know if you watched the show Industry, but she's the star of that, and that show's dope. They come to the house because like, hey, we were just in the city. Things are kind of weird. We need to stay at our house. And this movie is Sam Esmail, like, oh yeah, this guy clearly is a director. He can direct, because I saw this a second time, and it's a movie that actually tells you the plot on its face, but Esmail does such a great job with the tension that like you don't realize that you're just kind of being told everything pretty much verbatim, because it plays out like a mystery thanks to Esmail's script and direction. And then Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali are just two of the greatest actors on the planet, and them interacting with each other. Robert I love that the film plays on her America's sweetheart persona, because she kind of plays a Karen in this movie, just immediately skeptical of Mahershala Ali, a black man showing up at her door. And the microaggressions that she starts to show towards him. And the ending is just kind of have you seen this movie?
I have not.
It's an ending. Like I want to talk about the ending. I love it so much, and because it kind of throws you for a loop. Like it ends, and you're like, it almost just kind of stops. I'm like, what? Um, it's also an apocalyptic drama where the world is going to shit. Where it both again telegraphs overtly what is happening, but does it in a way in which you're always second guessing it. And this is based on a story. Sorry, I don't know who originally wrote it. Where Esmail, he took that story, but also added a bunch of set pieces to it. There's a piece at the very beginning where a giant tanker oil ship just crash lands on the beach, which Esmail just directs the hell out of it. And it came out later in the year on Netflix, and it's not getting any Oscar buzz. And frankly, I don't know if it deserves to, but it's also coming out kind of in this period where there's just a glut of like great movies where I can see how this can kind of get swept under the surface. But it's like, man, I love Sam Esmail. He's a guest on a bunch of podcasts I listen to because he's a friend of The Ringer. And I was like, I like Mr. Robot. I'll check it out. And just, again, I've seen it twice and just really impressed with it in large part because of Esmail's vision of the movie.
Yeah, another one I'm gonna have to circle back to because you said it. There's just such this giant glut of things this year, but this has got three people because I'm not familiar with Mahala, but like Mahershala, Julia Roberts, and Ethan Hawke. I like all of them, and it sounds like one where you gotta just kind of like you said, watch it and be part of the conversation. So yeah, that one kind of like Fair Play and a couple other Netflix things that came out this year. It's just stuff I got to get to.
All right, what is your number 8?
My number 8, a major testament to the quality of this year is how far this got pushed down my list. But my number 8 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
This is my number. Let me find the picture. This is my number. I think it's like 6.
So right around the same range. So
my number 7. So mine's coming up. So yeah, let's talk about Spider-Man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in theaters, but I was like kind of late to the game on it. It was like it had been out for a little bit when I finally saw it. But I went to this opening weekend, and the only reason that it's pretty far down in terms of my top 10 is that it's just part 1. It is not a full movie, and so it kind of, in some ways, it does not stand on its own 2 feet because it does not resolve the story.
But at the same time, I love that about it because it basically pulls the Empire Strikes Back card where
right.
I don't know if you had this thought, but it's like, after he kind of escapes the chase and you're looking at your watch and it's like, I feel like this movie's almost done, but the movie doesn't feel like it's almost done. What is going on? And yeah, it very overtly sets up a cliffhanger for the second one, but I kind of loved it where it's like, it was both final for that story and a cliffhanger. And I thought that worked out really well in its favor.
Yeah, I'm not taking too many points off for it because the ending of this, because I saw this twice. I went and saw it on the Thursday that it came out, and then 2 days later, my wife and I went and I saw it for the second time, and she saw it for the first time. The last 10 minutes of this are just absolutely pulse pounding, edge of your seat, like you got to remember to blink. And we'll go ahead and say spoiler alert because this is on Netflix right now. If you haven't watched this, go watch it on Netflix. Like, spoiler alert here. When it's revealed that he's in the wrong place and you realize that they've been leaving the clues that was going to happen for the entire movie, and why haven't watched it a second time, you pick up on that so much. Like, getting up to that point and then where it leaves off is just like, Oh, it's one of those ones
Like
that you just
you're,
like
you're
scream at when the credits roll. You know.
it's like, damn, writer strike. Like I really want this movie was in theory supposed to come out like fall of 2020. It's not coming out till at least 2025, but the animation is also absolutely incredible. Like it got the first one got praised for it, and I thought they outdid themselves. The different animation styles for the different characters, the fact that Gwen has a different animation style than Miles, and there's just a moment where Gwen is talking to her dad, and like just the color starts to evaporate from the room. It's like you guys are on another level with this shit. It's just incredible. And that fight chase scene, the big set piece towards the end, is just like it's like there's purposefully just little Easter eggs, and it's just like overloads your brain with just like the action, but you never lose place of where you are in the action either. And this is executive produced by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are just like at this point, 10 years in, at both animation and just storytelling. They did the Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs movies, and they did the 21 Jump Street movies. It's like they clearly know what they're doing with this. It's like this, like they were praised for their, like I said, praised for their animation style for the first one because it looks like there's called the picture style where everything seems so smooth, and they're like, oh, this first one, no, we're gonna make this look like a comic book movie. And the fact that they outdid themselves was just absolutely breathtaking. I took my 6-year-old to see this, who absolutely loves Spider-Man, and the fact that there's just a whole bunch of Spider-Man in the movie, like he loved it. And you're right, like watching it a second time, you see like the actual spider, like before they send him back, you see what Earth they send him back to, and it's the wrong one. And to pull that off, and for like, you're right, just play. I'm repeating myself. It's fantastic. I don't think it's such a good movie. There's not enough praise I can put up on it. So that was,
its rewatch value is just through the roof. Yeah.
So that was your number 8.
That was my number 8.
Okay, that was my number 7. So that's kind of perfect. So my number 8 is. Did you end up seeing The Iron Claw?
I did. Another one that I didn't crack my list just out of recency bias, but yeah, this was incredible. Yeah,
so this is basically the story of the Von Erich family, a very famous wrestling family right before the start of WWF. I am not familiar with it, but I knew enough where it's basically like this is the most tragic snake-bitten family in like the history of the world. And like even reading up about it, there's like, yeah, they purposely left out real life characters because like there's already so much death in this movie that they're like, we can't even pile on. Notably, it stars Zac Efron as, was it Kyle Von Erich?
Kevin.
Kevin Von Erich, thank you. As basically the surviving Von Erich. And just like, you knew that Zac Efron could act, but this is just like the perfect role for him, where not only can he is he just a handsome young man who just got friggin' cut and built for this movie, but like really shows some emotionality and depth to this work. Jeremy Allen White plays his brother, and another brother played by Harris Dickinson. But like this movie friggin' tricked me. I thought that I was going to see a wrestling movie, and it's not really a wrestling movie. This is basically a family drama about the dangers of toxic masculinity, where their father, played by Holt, how do you pronounce this list?
McCallany.
Thank you. He's the patriarch of this family, and you see the dangers that he puts on his kids that is very much a contributing factor to a lot of their death and mental health and mental illness. And it's like at the end, man, I was crying my eyes out. There's a scene, like both the final scene of the movie where Zac Efron's having a conversation with his sons. And I'll just say the final scene with Jeremy Allen White. I'm like, my wife was like, I could tell you were crying, and I wasn't even looking at you by like the way you were breathing. I'm like, packed theater, and I'm just like tears rolling down my face. It was just so beautiful and so moving. And even at the beginning of the movie, I was like, this was kind of slow. Like at the end, like I totally get it, because it's like you're trying to cherish the time that you have with your family as much as possible before it all goes to shit. And it all goes to shit in a hurry. and it was beautiful and it was affecting. And I loved it. Again, if you can make me cry at the end of your movie, like I'm not admit that like I've cried in movies, but I'm just really not a crier. So if you can just if a movie can get me to feel that way, then man, I'm on board.
Yeah, I'm the same way where it's few and far between enough that when it does happen, it's super memorable. And to me, like I said, like this was another one that was just like, if we were doing like a top 25, I would have probably fit this in and probably would have fit it in pretty high. But I want to make sure I was getting to some other stuff that was going to be less seen. But Iron Claw, I'm hoping that the reception that it's getting is going to help it get some recognition that like the critics all the critics award ceremonies have not necessarily been giving it, because Zac Efron is seriously like amazing in this. And if it was up to me, he would make the top 5 for best actor if it was up to me. And because like the scene where his future wife, played by Lily James, is asking him out on a date right after he just got done with a wrestling match, and he looks concussed, and she's putting the moves on him, and he's just like, oh yeah, like one of his eyes is halfway like swollen shut, and he can barely speak to her. But then he's just like, oh, like, okay, yeah, and then like but then it like starts into their courtship, and you just kind of get the sense that he's this just Adonis of a man who's a little simple, and he clearly doesn't realize the things that he's been put through, and you just feel for him in every single part of this performance. And the other part that I'll call out just super quick for it is the parents are played by Holt McCallany, as we talked about, and then Maura Tierney, who I always associate with like ER, and then she's the mom in like Liar Liar,
Yeah.
She doesn't pop up in a lot of movies, but when you see her, it's like, oh yeah, her, The two of them, these types of roles in a movie that stars Zac Efron, it comes out this time of year, you would think that these are the roles that would go to like very A-list, like award darling people that are looking for like Oscar nominations, but it doesn't. It goes to these two character actors who don't get a lot of like meaty roles like this, and they just kill it in as the parents and just add so much emotionality, because the father is just this monster and the mom is just kind of just like, oh well, you gotta deal with it, but then you see how all the tragedy starts to wear on her. So yeah, the performances in this movie are what just absolutely turn it into something so memorable. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Maura Tierney, she also had breast cancer, which I think
I see. Now, see that I didn't even know that. So there you go.
Yeah, so she was out of the game for a little bit, but yeah, she was excellent in it. All right, so what's your number 7?
My number 7, right after Spider-Man. So we can jump into a conversation that we had talked about a while back. It is The Killer. You just passed it.
All right, so The Killer is my number 3. So let's have a conversation about The Killer.
So I loved this, and some people say that it's like a downgrade from certain things that David Fincher has done. It's a downgrade to me from Gone Girl, but that's because Gone Girl is just like a 9 out of 10 masterpiece to me. And The Social Network is in my top like 5 movies of all time. So I love David Fincher. We've talked about him before with his just the atmosphere that he creates in his movies. And what I was not expecting with The Killer was it to be so much of a film noir. And I likened Michael Fassbender in this to like a Humphrey Bogart, where you're just getting that inner monologue of this guy who's just trudging along. And it's so simple, and every assassin movie has the same plot. People like it will like change your life when you realize that, but every assassin movie has the same plot. They are all about getting back at your organization, and this one is no different. But what I loved is the unconventional set pieces, which one of them is in St. Charles, Illinois, for all of our local friends. It just takes these different conventions to the way that he goes about his business. And I love seeing like his storage units and the way that he like stalks people, that he's like buying stuff on Amazon and doing the rental cars and all of his and I mentioned like Bogart, like all of his pseudonyms are like famous like detective characters and stuff. Like, so they're like I just honestly, like, if you're a fan of David Fincher, which I am, I didn't care for Mank that much. It was just, I was just like, whatever on it. And this is exactly what I wanted to see him like come back to. And just such a fun thing to watch. I loved it.
Yeah, this is my, like I said, third favorite movie of the year. This is my third favorite Fincher movie behind Social Network and Seven. And you're right, the plot is very almost cliche, where there's a hit gone wrong, and then things start to go haywire, and Fassbender's character, just known as the killer, basically there's a series of vignettes where he then has to kill like the organization and other assassins that went after him to make this mission quote unquote right. And that story in and of itself is fine, and I think works as a straightforward story. But what I love so much is just how much you can impart upon this story because it's Fincher. Not only, I feel like this is very much like David Fincher is the killer, where it's a guy who spends this elaborate time setting up the perfect shot and he misses. Just like David Fincher sets up the perfect shot and something goes wrong. And he has to do it again. Like, this is the world of like, what if David Fincher has to misses, and what is in David Fincher's mind? What is his miss that he needs to correct? And this is also a movie about the American workforce and the American capitalism. Like, the joke is that the first hit takes place in an abandoned WeWork. He goes out to get a McDonald's. He shops at Amazon. They go to the fitness centers, I think, a major brand. It's just like, oh yeah, this is Fincher's view of what the workforce looks like. And at the very end, where it's like, crap, is this really what I want out of my work-life balance? And then also commentary about how we use technology, where he can just, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy a Keep Fab copier on Amazon to get to the store. And so much of that underlying, under the surface points that I'm confident Fincher is trying to tell is like really what elevates it for me. Because right, otherwise it's just, if you only look at it as a generic killer revenge, like assassin revenge story, you're just not going to get a lot out of it. Like, and I've actually heard reviews of people that were just talking about the service level, and I just wanted to scream into my phone. It's like, you are missing the point. You are looking at the duck, and you are not looking at the feet that are moving rapidly underneath the water, which is really what elevates this movie. I also just love movies like where it's just like a scene of like two actors playing up against each other. And the scene with the Q-tip played by Tilda Swinton and Fassbender at dinner, I'm like, man, this scene just fucking works for me. Of like, Tilda Swinton is just an all-time great actress, and Fassbender just doing his thing as the stoic killer. Like, that scene just fucking worked for me.
Yeah.
The fight scene that happens with the Brute, the scene with Charles Parnell, like, it's all fun. It all works for me. And for me, the reason this is so high for Fincher is that I feel like, as great as he is, and he's a guy who I think, there's always going to be a super high floor because it's David Fincher. But for me, there's like just a deep flaw with the rest of his filmography that I like almost all of them put behind The Killer, because to me, this one, like, it executes exactly what he wants to do, Whereas I feel like so much of his filmography doesn't, and that's why I just have it. So I personally on my David Fincher ranking is because from start to finish, this movie just fucking works. And this is a shame where it's another Netflix movie where it's like, this is a David Fincher movie. It should be getting more awards buzz. And I know it's not a typical prestige drama, but it's a David Fincher movie. Like, there are a lot of things of Mank that I like, even though that's a deeply flawed movie. And it shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, here's a drama about Hollywood that gets a bunch of Oscar nominations, but a really cool, somewhat genre assassin movie. It's just, I don't think it's going to get anything. In part because I think Netflix has too many other things it's going to promote, but it's just like, that's a bummer, man. This movie friggin' rocks.
Yeah, I loved it. I gotta watch it again too. I think it might sneak in with a couple of like sound nominations, with some of the stuff that he was doing, like going in and out of the headphones and stuff. And I would love it if it, like, I mean, it's never gonna happen, but I would love it if it sneaks in with like a cinematography. But because there's so many powerhouses with the cinematography this year, but yeah, this was a good movie. I was glad I saw it in theaters. I was heavily anticipated and did not disappoint.
You're right. The sound design is incredible. It probably will get a sound, but I also will say, literally every podcast I listen to was like, I'm glad I saw this in the theaters. And yet every movie is going to be better when you saw it in the theater. I saw this at home while tweeting, which I don't recommend normally, and I still love this movie. You can enjoy The Killer without seeing it in the theater, I promise you. So was that your number 7?
That was my number 7.
So my number 7 was Across the Spider-Verse. So what's your number 6?
My number 6 is Past Lives.
Talk about it.
So not the typical thing that I gravitate towards, but it was very, very, getting like lots of great commentary on it. So another one that was playing over the summer. So I went out and saw it. And the reason that I'm putting this in my top 10 this year is because I just have not been able to forget how utterly devastating like watching this unfold was. And on a personal level, there were parts of it that really spoke to me. So early in our relationship, before my wife and I were married, but early when we were dating, we spent a lot of our relationship in long distance. It's obviously not anywhere close to the situation that plays out in this movie, but just that little part of it was able to connect me to this in a way that made it just feel so relatable. And add that to how incredible it's got incredible writing. Celine Song, this is her directorial debut, if I remember correctly. She writes an incredible screenplay with this because it's just so painful to listen to. But the direction that she does on this is absolutely mind-blowing. Because the comment that I made when I did my write-up for Letterboxd was that you see the scenes in person and you just feel the distance between them. Did you see this movie?
Yeah, I saw it a couple weeks ago.
Okay, good. So hopefully you relate to this then. The distance that you feel in the blocking of the scenes when all three of them are together. And then but then when you're watching them on their iChats, because this is set in parts of it are set in the past, so it's not Zoom. It was like Apple FaceTime or whatever.
No, it was what we all used before Zoom. I forget.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, they're video chatting, right? Through old Mac computers.
Through Skype.
Oh yeah, and those scenes of the movie are like the most intimate scenes of the movie when they're reconnecting after they haven't seen each other in a really long time, and then it gets to the part where they're like, we should not talk to each other for a while because we're just getting too invested and we're not seeing each other, and just the devastation that you feel in those scenes and the intimacy that you feel in those scenes. And then when they get together and it's just like, it is hard to watch in certain parts. It is absolutely gorgeous to watch in certain parts, but it's just so like just connecting and engaging. And it was one that I just could not stop thinking about after I watched it. I thought that the director and the writer was just absolutely sensational for not making any movies before this. I really want at least one of them. Hopefully Greta Lee is the star. I really, really, really want to see her in the best actress race. I don't know if it's going to happen. Probably not. But like, yeah, this one just really, really just hits you hard.
The beautiful indie movie. Highly recommend. My number 6 is the other Ayo Edebiri movie. I guess now at this point, the third Ayo Edebiri movie to make this list, and that's Bottoms. Emma Sigelman is the director in her second project, teaming up again with Rachel Sennett. They did a first movie called Shiva Baby. Bottoms is the story about two lesbians played by Sennett and Edebiri, who are the quote ugly lesbians who can't get dates. So they start a fight club in their high school to get their crushes to like them. And this movie is friggin' hysterical. It has Marshawn Lynch, the football player. His goofy ass plays the teacher of the club. And this movie is a send-up of high school movies. I was watching it with some friends, and we were kind of just like, why are those guys wearing football uniforms outside of football? I was like, it's a satire. He's like, oh, okay. And once you get into that mindset that this movie is basically like this generation's version of Heathers, and it is making fun of high school movies, and it is over the top, and it is silly, and it is goofy, and it is hilarious, and I absolutely loved it. Again, just a movie that makes me laugh out loud. It's so silly. It has such a great tone to it, and I really enjoyed it.
So I did see Bottoms, and I was one of the very, very rare minority that it did not work for me.
Yeah.
And part of it was that because I enjoyed the building of like the hyper stylized world of the high school where like the football players are in the uniforms like all the time. I got that, and that like that like so like parts of it were funny, but like to me like the humor. So it was produced, and it even says on the poster there actually. So it's produced by Elizabeth Banks.
Yeah.
And a lot of the humor that she embodies into like the Pitch Perfect movies, some of that got put into this as well. And that just like hits and misses for me, like her style of humor. But just overall Bottoms, it didn't make me laugh enough to have it be as goofy as it was. And it also got into a pretty like dark and emotional place like towards the end, which didn't match with like the really goofy tone. But really the biggest part of it for me was that I was way, way, way more interested in like all of the girls that joined the fight club. Because there was a lot of like interesting stories there, I felt, with like some of their backgrounds, and you go into it a little bit, but it is obviously focuses much more on the two leads. And I was just like, honestly, you guys are both kind of like huge jerks. So I wasn't as much of a fan of like their characters as I was seeing like the rest of the ensemble, and they all just kind of get shuffled to the side. But Marshawn Lynch was very funny in this. I was not expecting him to like actually like work as like where he has to like actually play a character, but he was funny. So maybe this is one that I would have to like revisit at some point. But I saw it in theaters. I did not find myself laughing at it all that much, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with comedies is that I think sometimes it either works for you or it doesn't. This one like really worked on me. I get 100% what Segelman was going for. I understand the humor of what she was going for in the genre she was trying to play in. So I absolutely loved it. Let's get top 5 time.
Top 5. So rounding out my top 5 is going to be number 5 at Asteroid City. So what's funny is that I'm a big time Wes Anderson fan. I watched this the first time because I saw it twice in theaters. I saw it the first time, and honestly, like, so much of it was so unexpected. Even though, like, I knew what I was getting into with a Wes Anderson movie, there's like a story within a story aspect of this. Did you see this movie?
I hate Wes Anderson, so nope.
Okay.
I'm going to be done with Wes Anderson. Like, I guarantee you, I'm not going to like this movie because I don't
Probably
like him
not
as a director. So, like, I'm just gonna if his movies are just not for me, I'm just going to excuse myself from the conversation.
Honestly, you're not the only person I know that has that outlook, and I'm going to tell you right now, if that is your outlook, then you absolutely should not even bother, because this isn't my favorite Wes Anderson movie, but it is like the most Wes Anderson movie in a lot of ways. So it took me 2 watches to like catch on to a lot of the stuff that really made me love it, which was like how funny it is and how like quietly funny it is. But I am a fan of Wes Anderson though. So I was super into this. It made me laugh. The ensemble cast is just great. And it's a really like bizarre. What happens in it is like what's advertised, the asteroid city where they're all like living by the crater. That's actually a play that is being put on for television, which is being written by Edward Norton's character and directed by Adrian Brody's character. And that really, like, I was not expecting that like layer of it. And then it's narrated like The Twilight Zone by Bryan Cranston. So it's just it's very, very strange, and it takes a lot of getting used to. At least it did for me. But Wes Anderson, his style just works for me by itself. So that was enough to make me say, like, I was like, oh man, I gotta like digest this, and I did, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. It's just very, very fun, very funny to me, but only if you're a fan.
Awesome. All right, my number 5 is a film that was earlier in your list that I asked you to put a pin in. So like I said, this is super high on my list. I almost don't even want to say the name of the movie. I hope like YouTube doesn't think that like we're actually causing. It is Out to Blow Up a Pipeline. It is, I think I don't know if it's directorial debut. It's by this guy named Daniel Goldhaber. And this movie fucking rocks, man. Like I like my elevator pitch is that it's Ocean's 11 for eco-terrorism. This movie like really works for me, both of like from a plot motion. Like the title is literally what a handful of characters do. It's like we're getting the team together to commit some violence, and it both does that in a way that's entertaining, and you really get to know these characters and where their point of view and where they're all coming from. And it's a little bit of like, again, like the heist of like trying to avoid the cops aspect of this. That like, man, I saw it streaming on Hulu. I don't know if it is still anymore, but I think this movie friggin' rules. And just like, to me, it was a white knuckle ride from beginning to finish that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, I'm looking it up here. It's still streaming on Hulu. I saw this way back in like March, I think, because I saw this is another one that I just like caught in theaters. And this was in my top 10 for a while, and eventually just got like knocked out by other stuff that I saw over the course of the year. but it, I mean, you said it exactly. It's getting the crew together and executing the plan, and it also like works in, I mean, it's like the message is like very like, it's not subtle at all. It's like it's all in the title, like, but
it's very lefty.
just right. And but what it does is it causes you to really think about what drives people to this kind of extremism, and not necessarily to say like, oh, it's fine, because you would think that this movie is just like, oh yeah, and it was like totally justified. It is more nuanced than you would think this has, or this has a right to be, right? Like, it's, I hope that like when Civil War comes out next year,
I am not looking from
I hope that
we don't need that.
Has
that movie.
So, and that's what I'm saying, is that like, I hope that movie surprises me and has the same level of deftness that How to Blow Up a Pipeline has, because How to Blow Up a Pipeline like handled what its subject matter is as well as you possibly could, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Really love this movie. All right, that was my number 5. What is your number 4?
My number 4 is, I'm pretty sure you have not watched, because we talked about it once or twice. It is Godzilla -1.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed I didn't see it, because after we talked about it, everyone that I heard was like, oh, everyone was like, yeah, this movie's actually great. And you didn't think it would be great, but it is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's incredible. So I'm not like a giant Godzilla head, at least not like built in. I watched the original 1954 Godzilla right before seeing this, and I'm very happy I did, because you don't like need it, but it certainly helps. I'm not going to say too much, because frankly, this is still playing in theaters. So if anybody watches this and is on the fence, like, guarantee here, I only came out in December, and it immediately jumped into my top 5 movies of the year. This is just an absolutely like vicious version of Godzilla that looks utterly incredible. But this is also very like quietly a period piece, and it's set in the aftermath of World War II in Japan, versus the original Godzilla was made in 1954, and it's basically set in like present day. So it's like the post-war industry of Japan, and obviously the nuclear allegory exists, but what this movie does with it is it just creates this amazing human drama going alongside this, like, one of the best Godzilla like monsters that you have ever like seen or imagined. How he looks in this is just absolutely insane. There's like, honestly, there's like 3 or 4 set pieces that I could say is like the coolest things that I saw in a movie this year, and maybe ever. It like, you honestly, like, it just has to be seen to be believed. So it's still out there. It keeps on getting its run extended because it's making all this money. It's like, for compared to American movies, it's actually low budget, but you would never ever guess it, because for how much they show Godzilla, because in like the 2014 version, like, he's like, there's like a lot of like kind of like, oh, here he is, and now we're looking at him from far away. This movie is not like that. This is not some low budget little thing, even though like it is a low budget. The like Godzilla looks amazing, the action's incredible, and honestly, like, you may shed a tear by the end. It's so great.
Yeah, everyone who I've heard, mainly on podcasts, that's seen this movie absolutely adores it, which makes me even more upset that I kind of was dismissing you when we were talking about it. So Definitely one that I'll have to check out. My number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So what's your number 3?
My number 3, I'm pretty sure you don't have a slide for this. And it's one that pretty much nobody is going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it because I just loved it so much. And it is a Guy Ritchie film called Operation Fortune.
Oh, you like this movie? Okay, speak on it.
So, look, it is what it is. It's a generic like James Bond imitation spy movie, but that is just so much my jam. Aubrey Plaza's in it, and she's awesome just in general, but like her character is like this like hacker chick who also like kicks ass. Jason Statham, you get what you pay for with Jason Statham. Hugh Grant is
Josh Hartnett.
Josh Hartnett having a good year. Hugh Grant, the Hugh Grant era that we currently live in, like hashtag Wonka Hive, hashtag Paddington 2, even though I like Paddington 1 better, but whatever. Hugh Grant is kind of like an asshole billionaire in this movie. Like what it is just, again, it's your off-brand James Bond movie directed by Guy Ritchie. I love Guy Ritchie. He makes just like these perfect, like funny crime movies that if you've seen any of his like Snatch or anything, like you know what you're getting into. Everything about this is, you know what you're getting into, and all of it is for me. And so this was supposed to come out last year, and I was so bummed that it didn't. It finally came out, and I went and saw it, and I was just like, I freaking love this movie, and I don't care that like me and 5 other people saw it. This is just like the perfect thing right up my alley, and it's in my top 3. And for a while, for a hot minute, it was like my number 1 movie of the year.
maybe I'll have to check it out because I saw a lot of it on the plane, and I was like, "This movie's bad," but
it's like.
I guess maybe I need to give it a chance.
I'm never gonna sit here and tell you that it's like some hidden gem of like amazing film quality. It is just, if you like globe-trotting movies where people are putting on turtlenecks and beanies and sneaking into mansions and going to cocktail parties and like doing kung fu fights and like that, like this is the movie for you. It's great.
All right, so my number 3 was The Killer. So what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Oppenheimer.
Let's talk about Oppenheimer.
So, I mean, we got into it quite a bit earlier, but so my thoughts that I'll add is that it is one of those 3-hour-long movies that, like, not a single second of those 3 hours was out of place. And I mentioned that I've seen it twice. The second time, I made the trek out to the AMC River East in Chicago and got to see it on 70 millimeter. I did not have access to one of the like 13 screens on Earth that can do the IMAX 70 millimeter print. So unfortunately that wasn't in the cards, but you asked me earlier where, and I told you it's like, this is going to be certainly like around the top 5 of Christopher Nolan for me. And what I'll say about it compared to his other movies is that I feel like Universal wanted him so badly that they were going to just give him whatever he wanted. And what he wanted was to make a biopic of Robert Oppenheimer, and it was going to be 3 hours and 0 minutes long. And what he got out of those 3 hours was, we talked about his screenplays. What he got out of it was his fully formed screenplay. And it gets back all of these like little like dialogue callbacks that I've seen him try to do in some of his other movies that don't quite land. But in this one, because of how long it was, like if he had made this, if he had stayed with Warner Brothers and made Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer was like 25 minutes shorter, I probably would have hated this movie, and or just been like, this movie just like is kind of in like the Tenet tier of like, oh wow, this is really cool, but not quite what I think that it should have been. But because he just got so many great actors working everywhere, because the script was able to do what it was able to do in the amount of time that it was, this movie just worked so well for me. And I saw it twice in theaters, did not move my ass for 5 seconds. And when the Oscar nominations come out and this is up for Best Picture, like I will probably go see it a third time, just enjoy the hell out of sitting there for 3 hours and not being able to move. Like I loved every second of it.
Yeah, so like I said, this was 16 on my list because I walked out of the theater and like my first reaction, I told my friend, I was like, that was a really good movie that was just deeply flawed. Where to me, the moment Matt Damon his character comes onto the screen to the Trinity test, I'm like, the Martin Scorsese meme, this is cinema. Like that stretch of the movie is absolutely incredible. And like the opening is just, it is what it is. Then it's like, now once Matt Damon comes in and we're going to build the bomb, it's like we are clicking on all cylinders. This is great. Again, a lot of the game comes together. Benny Safdie has like weirdly turned into like one of the best character actors alive, which is, I never would have expected that after seeing Good Time, I mean, I shouldn't say that. He was really good acting in Good Time, but like he's just now transitioned to acting and he's incredible. And then after the Trinity test, it turns into a courtroom drama / like this weird
Confirmation hearing.
Confirmation hearing of Robert Downey Jr.'s character. I'm like, what are we doing here, guys? Nolan, what if it's just that part of the film, the whole third act just bugged the crap out of me that I was like, this does not work for me. Yet, with all that being said, I think this film should win Best Picture, and at minimum, Nolan should win Best Director, because regardless what you think about Christopher Nolan, he's just one of the most influential directors of our time right now. And the fact that he can make a 3-hour docudrama about J. Robert Oppenheimer and it makes $1 billion, like give him a gold statue finally. Like I thought he should have deserved it for Dunkirk, but like at some point the Oscars should be like this point of like we're recognizing some of the greats, and like Christopher Nolan is now at the point of his career where he's clearly one of the greats. Like I said, he is, I think, even though he maybe like he has less years than some of the guys I directed, you know, the guys I was talking about earlier in this, like Miyazaki and like Scorsese and Ridley Scott, who have years on him. It's just like the defining director of our generation and of this moment is Christopher Nolan. And this movie is very much a Christopher Nolan film. I mean, like it or hate it, this is like, you can close your, like, if you didn't know anything, you just saw this, like, oh yeah, Christopher Nolan directed that movie. And the fact that it's resonated so much with our culture, even not so much with me, it's just like, just give him the Oscar for Best Director. And I was just going to say, speaking of Oppenheimer, let's move to my number 2, which is Barbie. I know you weren't the biggest fan of it. And, you know, you have a really smart critique, and you're not 100%, you're not wrong at all about your critique that you wrote on Letterboxd. And I resaw this again. I saw this movie in the theater, and I came out of the movie, was like, that's the best movie that I've seen in the best 5 years. Like, that movie is just incredible. You know, as I said, and I thought about it, and even as I watched it, like, it does have some legitimate story criticisms. And honestly, for the most part, I don't give a shit. Like, this movie is just one of the most fun theater experiences I've ever had. Directed by and co-written by Greta Gerwig. Like, I just want all big budget, you know, movies based on IP to be, because there's clearly so much of Greta Gerwig in this movie. The fact that Mattel like signed off on so much of this movie is just signed off on all of it, to me is just incredible. I think Ryan Gosling gives the performance of the year. I mean, I think he's absolutely I don't know how many actors on the planet can pull off what he did so perfectly as Ken. Weirdly, this movie is like Ken's movie. It's like not Barbie's movie.
The word you're looking for is sublime.
He's so good. The I'm Just Ken Dream Ballet has clearly resonated with our culture. It's one of my favorite scenes of the year. And yeah, you can have criticisms, and I think basically all of your criticisms are right. This movie is just so much fun to watch, though. And even though a lot of the first half of the movie is carrying the second half, like, and I legitimately think Barbie storyline sucks. The one criticism I think, the one that actually like legit bugs me is that Barbie apologizes to Ken at the end, even though Ken steals her house. Like, come on, this movie is like so overtly feminist. Probably shouldn't have done that. But regardless, again, I don't care. This movie is so fun and so enjoyable. And again, one of the best theater, like seeing a comedy, like with everybody who's in on the joke and who's just laughing along with you, just like makes the movie better. And even watching this again at home, it's now streaming on Max. I love it. I love this movie so much. It
was a great movie, and honestly, like, and you mentioned, like my critiques of it, and it obviously did not make my list, but it was right in the tier for me of like American fiction, where it was like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it, and I am like delighted that it's going to have like the accolades that it has, and it doesn't quite stick the landing for me. And so it's in that same tier of movies right there. But you're absolutely right about everything you're saying. And I especially the part where it's like, I wish that all IP driven movies were taken as seriously and taken the care to have like the message put in. You're absolutely right though. Like, I think it's just hilarious that there's a decent enough chance that Ryan Gosling's going to be Oscar nominated and Margot Robbie's not. I think that because of that, they probably will nominate Margot Robbie. But if I'm telling the truth, she's not in like the top 5 actresses. I mentioned Greta Lee before. I would choose her over Margot Robbie. If it was down to the two of them, I would say like, give me Greta for Past Lives. Because you said it like more bluntly than I would. Like, Barbie's story in this movie, like, it does kind of suck, like, and like she gets overshadowed by Ken in her own movie and not as part of the story. Like it kind of happened. Like, Ken just completely steals the show, and it ends with his arc getting resolved instead of Barbie's arc getting resolved. So I have like my little quibbles with it, but this is what a big time blockbuster movie should look like, and it's really important that it has this, like, the story for women that it does is just like, a lot of people talk about like wokeness and stuff, and it's like, there's a reason that these voices they feel like they have like some overcoming and some compensation to like try to reach artistically. And it's because for so long you could not break through with that. And that's what, like, Barbie is among the films that are like culminating that, where it's just this powerful message of like, here we are. And so for that alone, it's like, yes, this is absolutely like great movie for what it is.
And when you look back on some of like the great big budget movies, like it's particularly Star Wars, like, sure, George Lucas deserves a lot of credit, but like what makes these huge movies as good as it is so many below the line people, and the set design and the cinematography and the costume design of this movie is just absolutely incredible. Like, even if you don't like the story, like the amount of like work and care, and it's also fun. I think like this film like used up all the pink paint in the world.
I was going to say that, yeah.
But the set design of Barbie World and the costume, it's so perfect and it's so great. And you're right. This move, like the right, like did criticize this movie because like I think Ryan Gosling's character like Ken uses patriarchy like 10 times in the movie. To me, it's like it's just a dumb pejorative because like you don't agree with that point of view. But like when they're going through like they're making fun of the Godfather, it's like, oh, I've never seen the Godfather. It's like you are. This is like a personal attack on me, and I still find it absolutely hilarious. They're like, oh, the Robert Evans in the studio system. It's like that's just such a fucking great joke, and it did get criticized. I think the big speech that America Ferrera gives is like, this isn't a fucking like past life. This isn't like an indie prestige film per se. This is a big budget film for the masses, so it's not going to have the nuance in it. But you shouldn't expect it to. This is Barbie, guys. Like,
right.
I don't really necessarily expect the super nuanced points. Like, this is a movie meant for everyone, and clearly it worked on so many people. But like for me, it's okay that Greta Gerwig hit me over the head with her point of view. A lot of times, it's like, okay, man, if you're gonna take Mattel's money to make a freaking Barbie movie, like do this, man, hit me over the head because it worked on me, and I thought it was absolutely awesome. Are we gonna have the same number one?
Maybe. Real quick before we jump off of Barbie, just a super quick piece of trivia that I was reading that I thought was absolutely insane. So once the Oscar nominations come out on January 28th, and if Barbie, as expected, is nominated for Best Picture, what's going to happen is Greta Gerwig's first 3 movies that she directed, which is Lady Bird, Little Women 2019, and now Barbie, her first 3 movies will all be nominated for Best Picture in her filmography. That will be the first person that has ever done that. And
that's crazy.
And now make a very specific note. I did not say the first woman. I said the first person that has ever done that. There are, I think the stat was like 67 men or something. I would have to go pull that article that I read. I think it was on Collider. But it like pulled all the metrics of people that like came close, and then like their third movie didn't get it, and there's like some elite, like famous Hollywood directors in there. But if Barbie is nominated for Best Picture as we expect it to be, like she's making history in a big way, in a way that is like she's in addition to the way that she has already done so with this movie, because it's the highest grossing female directed movie, like just all the ways. So yeah, Barbie, a gigantic story of the year, and like so fitting.
Yeah, I'm so bummed her next assigned project is the Chronicles of Narnia
on Netflix.
It's like, come on. Can you get out of that? Can you just like say, no, sorry, Netflix, I know can do that.
I've made a huge mistake.
I know. All right, what's your number one?
My number one is Blackberry.
Yeah, baby. That's my number one movie of the year. I think considering how much we both love The Social Network, I guess it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
Right, you go first. Speak on Blackberry.
So I mentioned this before where I like it's a big problem for me when a true life movie is just like, all right, well, here it is. Like, this is what happened. And like Blackberry elevated beyond that for me for several reasons. One, I work for one of the major cell phone companies, and I remember Blackberries very, very well. My first smartphone that I ever had was a Blackberry, so there was a lot of nostalgia built into it for that reason. Watching how this plays out against the introduction of the iPhone was just, and then seeing like the behind the scenes of like what they did to like handle that was such a new perspective that I wasn't expecting. So the story personally just really connected to me. But I know you're probably going to talk about this too, but Mr. Dennis Reynolds absolutely just like like for me,
such
like
a sassy man.
Performance of the year. Like performance of the year. He was so freaking great. And I know his name's not Dennis Reynolds. Glenn Howerton. Like a lot of the reviews on Letterboxd were doing like the Dennis system about how to take over BlackBerry, which was hilarious to me. Like he just like everything about what he does in this movie, it just was just like absolutely scene stealing, absolutely crushed it. Not to be disrespected though, is Jay Baruchel, who is like, I love him. He's so funny in so many things, but in this, watching him, you're just like, oh my God, like it's so like upsetting the way that he like turns from this idealist into this like kind of like corporate sleazebag, but then he like tries to like come back a little bit. And really what solidified this as a movie that I was going to love was how they ended it. The very, very last shot of him opening every single one from the plant in China, and like doing the little screwdriver, and I was just
an
like,
amazing
that just
call back to the first scene of the movie.
Yes, that just like smacked it home for me. I was just like, this was entertaining as hell. It was a story that I felt connected to. It's got these great performances in it. It is relevant to our times. It's like, it's not quite The Social Network, because social media in general, what like just like honestly, like there was talk about this, like, and this is gonna sound weird, but like they could make like a Social Network 2 that would be extremely compelling now. But like what did I say? It was BlackBerry, Steve Jobs, and The Social Network. It was like the millennial tech trilogy of
movies.
Yeah, all three good movies, and you connect them, so it's because it's like the order would be Social Network, BlackBerry, and then Steve Jobs, because you have like Facebook, smartphones, and then iPhones. And just man, that, but like, so like you and I are on the same wavelength, where this just like was like already is my type of movie, and then it just, everything about it worked. And yeah, I just was so into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to highlight a lot of the same points where like we both love The Social Network, and there's probably not going to be another film in the genre that will ever beat The Social Network, but this is like clearly number 2. Yeah, again, you alluded to it, and you know, like so much of this movie could just be a Wikipedia entry of here's what happened with BlackBerry, here's how they met. And the fact that they gloss over the rise of BlackBerry is like such a smart, creative decision. It's just like, we get together, and then boom, BlackBerry is the biggest thing on the planet. You don't need to know that, like, how, guy, you don't need to know the specifics. Just, we don't know BlackBerry was big. BlackBerry was big. And then, you know, you start to then to the second half of the movie is the downfall of it. And just to put these characters first, like led by Baruchel and Howerton, we're like, if there was a Just World Glenn Howard, like it's a tough category anyway, and this movie's like probably a bit too small, but like Glenn Howerton as Jim Balsillie is just like incredible. Like he really, like he got, I think, some Independent Spirit Award nomination, the Independent Spirit Award nomination.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he probably like, and it also sucks. Like this movie is now on AMC Plus, and it's like a 3-part. Like they made it into a mini series.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I heard about that. It's like
nobody's seeing this movie. Like I really wish this had gotten like dropped on Netflix, and hopefully people on Netflix could like get a boom, because like more people need to see this movie. Matt Johnson, a name who should probably mention, who is the director of the movie, and he plays Baruchel's number 2, Doug. Is not only super funny in the movie, but shoots this movie in a way where it's kind of like a wildlife documentary almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he shoots the hell of it, and it's man, it's more people need to see this movie. It's so good and it's so fun. And I love that like Glenn Howerton's downfall is his character's downfall is hockey.
Yeah.
He gets too hockey trying to fight. That's such a smart and it also I think is a story not only about the technology of our lives, but it's just like again, it's a kind of like weirdly about the killer too. It's like this is a movie about work-life balance. Like it's a running joke. It's a running joke throughout the movie. Where like, oh, we need to have a movie night.
Yeah.
But it's like then that Matt Johnson's character has a moment. It's like, do you know why we have movie nights? Because we work 23 hours a day and sleep at our desk. We need some reprieve. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the modern millennial ideal of like, oh, it's just so much of this movie works for me. I'm so glad I was able to see it in the theater. I think it'll work if you don't see it in the theater. But this movie is like the closest I think movies will ever come to recreating The Social Network. And I love it for that comparison, and I love it on its own. And like I want to get AMC just to see it, like the 3-part like miniseries again. But like more people need to watch this movie. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the miniseries because I heard about that and I was just like, so like I'm interested in that just because I loved this movie so much that I would be happy to go and see like an extra like 2 hours of it basically. So like, but at the same time, that's gonna like take attention away from what came first, which was the movie, and the movie just like worked so well the way that it did. And I'm like, I would rather this get like really hyped up for what it already is. Cause like, I don't know if you ever saw this, but there's like a super long version of The Hateful Eight on Netflix. Yeah. I love The Hateful Eight. Like to me, the most underrated Quentin Tarantino movie. Quentin Tarantino, his movies are a brand unto themselves. He doesn't need to worry about like he can have like a super long version come out and it's gonna be like whatever it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, like you don't have to that's not going to be a distraction. And to me a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Blackberry, isn't that like a mini series on AMC? No, it was an awesome movie that came out in 2023 that you should have gone to see, but instead you think it's a TV show.
Yeah, I just more people need to see it. All right, I have to go pee. My wife is probably mad. So, what do you say we recap our 23 through 1?
Booyah! Okay, so I'll go first. 23, Last Voyage of the Demeter. 22, The Kill Room. 21, American Fiction. 20, Monster. 19, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. 18, A Haunting in Venice. 17, They Cloned Tyrone. 16, The League, which is a documentary. 15, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. 14, The Roundup No Way Out. 13, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. 12, John Wick Chapter 4. 11, The Holdovers. 10, Anatomy of a Fall. 9, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, no longer Part 1. 8, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. 7, The Killer. 6, Past Lives. 5, Asteroid City. 4, Godzilla -1. 3, Operation Fortune. 2, Oppenheimer. And number 1, Blackberry.
Awesome. My number 23 is The Beanie Bubble. 22, The Pale Blue Eye. 21, Fair Play. 20, Naiad. 19, Theater Camp. 18, Knock at the Cabin. 17, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. 16, Oppenheimer. 15, Air. 14, Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. 13, Napoleon. 12, Killers of the Flower Moon. 11, Poor Things. 10, May December. 9, Leave the World Behind. 8, The Iron Claw. 7, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. 6, Bottoms. 5, Out a Pipeline. 4, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. 3, The Killer. 2, Barbie. And 1, Blackberry. Well, we basically had a Martin Scorsese movie length conversation about the films of 2023. This was awesome. Thank you for doing this with me. Definitely have to have a chat once the Oscar nominations come out and have talk about movies again. We'll have to revisit our list because there are movies that we have not seen. At least definitely for me.
Anticipated films for 2024. All 10 of them that are actually going to come out.
Let's do it. All right. Good to talk to you, Colin. Take care.
Yeah. Talk to you.
Peace.
Bye.